Chapter 725. Mu Yu naturally did not dare to use his own body to guide the white life force. Otherwise, he would definitely end up like those flesh-winged horned monsters. The worst-case scenario would be that it would cause the black and white chi in his body to space-time and make things worse. The so close, yet worlds apart formation was like a giant net at this time, wrapping all the death chi in it. Fortunately, this giant net could be slightly deformed. Although it took Mu Yu a lot of effort, he was still able to turn it into a long and narrow shape, extending it into the beginning of chaos formation. However, Mu Yu soon discovered that the white life force was completely out of control. It was constantly affecting the flesh-winged horned monsters, making them excited and see hope. Then, they would be overwhelmed by the hope and power and explode, transforming the flesh-winged horned monsters into a part of themselves. The situation was getting more and more chaotic. All the flesh-winged horned monsters had been destroyed by the white life force, but because of this, the white life force was getting stronger and stronger, and it was constantly eroding the entire formation. White life chi's method of corroding formations was different from that of death chi. Death chi would directly devour the formations, while life chi would make the things it came into contact with stronger, completely erupting their hidden potential until they had no more potential left, exploding and becoming a part of white life chi. Mu Yu did not dare to get too close, nor did he dare to casually remove the so close, yet worlds apart formation. He planned to use Mu Ling as a bridge to guide the white life force into the formation to compete with the death chi. Golden runes covered the wood spirit, and the world's end next neighbor formation turned the wood spirit into a slender branch. One end of the branch extended into the world's end near, yet worlds apart formation, while the other end was drawn into the white vitality. After the white life force encountered the lifeless Mu Ling, it began to crazily rush towards it. It was obvious that the life force wanted to drive away the death chi, or rather, it wanted to transform Mu Ling into a part of itself. The life force quickly covered Mu Ling and began to fill the Mu Ling. Then, it followed Mu Ling into the worlds apart formation. The black and white chi collided with each other. The two completely different auras entangled together violently, devouring each other, trying to suppress the other. In the formation of so close, yet worlds apart, the death aura had the absolute advantage at the beginning. The white life aura would be tightly suppressed as soon as it entered, but as the white life aura increased, it began to resist and quickly grew stronger. The life force seemed to be trying to suppress the death chi. All the life force outside followed Mu Ling and entered the worlds apart formation. At this time, the death chi and the life force had gathered in the worlds apart formation. Mu Yu immediately removed the worlds apart formation on Mu Ling and wanted to take the Mu Ling back. However, Mu Yu was suddenly startled because he discovered that the wood spirit had changed once again. Originally, after absorbing the death aura, the wood spirit's entire body would be black. But now, the wood spirit's body was flowing with a white aura. The white chi intertwined with the original black chi. The whole Mu Ling sword became very strange. Mu Ling's sword was already a mixture of black and white. Black and white light chased each other on its body. Originally, there were many holes of different sizes on Mu Ling. After absorbing the death chi, those holes were filled with black death chi and were not repaired. But at this time, those holes were like the Tai Chi yin-yang fish. One black and one white chi flowed together. The aura of the whole Mu Ling sword had undergone a tremendous change. Originally, it had always been lifeless. But now, it was full of vitality. The two auras each occupied half of the sword. When Mu Yu wanted to take it back, it sent a desire to Mu Yu. You want to absorb the two auras inside? Mu Yu looked at Mu Ling in surprise. The thought that Mu Ling's sword transmitted to him just now shocked him. If you can do it, then go ahead and try. Mu Yu thought about it again and again and decided not to stop Mu Ling. This broken sword usually followed Mu Yu's wishes no matter what it did. This was the first time it took the initiative to ask to do something. After getting Mu Yu's permission, the golden formation pattern on Mu Ling's body lit up again. It directly entered so close, yet so far and rushed into the battlefield where the black and white chi were fighting. As soon as Mu Ling entered, it immediately turned into a huge body tree. This body tree was different from any other plants that Mu Ling usually turned into. Although it was tall, its branches and leaves were yellow. Moreover, there were countless wormholes on each leaf, as if they were bitten by insects. Not only that, but the entire body tree's trunk and branches were also filled with countless holes. It looked extremely haggard. The sudden appearance of the body tree made the black and white chi very irritable. This was because this was their battlefield. No outsiders were allowed to invade. The black and white chi came with great momentum. As they intertwined, they swept towards the body tree, wanting to devour and destroy it. However, no one expected that the holes on the withered leaves of the body tree that looked like they had been bitten by insects suddenly emitted an extremely powerful suction force. It actually took the initiative to suck in the black and white chi. Every hole on the body tree was crazily devouring the black and white chi, and those holes gradually began to heal. The withered leaves also began to turn green, becoming full of vitality again. This sudden situation surprised even Mu Yu because he never knew that Mu Ling's sword had such an ability. The body tree also looked very familiar. Mu Yu remembered that there was a body tree like this in the human. At that time, the old tree chief also took out Mu Ling from that body tree and gave it to Mu Yu. However, at that time, the body tree did not look as haggard as Mu Ling looked. "Little Commander, how much do you know about Mu Ling?" Mu Yu couldn't help but ask. The aura of life and death could devour everything, but it couldn't devour Mu Ling. What kind of sacred item was Mu Ling? Little Commander was also very puzzled. "I don't know. Back when you separated the aura of life and death from the netherworld grass, it wasn't this enthusiastic. Indeed, back when Mu Yu separated the aura of life and death from the netherworld grass, Mu Ling didn't appear this strange body tree, nor did it deliberately absorb the two auras. Today, it actually showed a very eager desire. It was very strange. Mu Yu couldn't understand, and neither could Little Commander. They could only wait outside. They waited for 4 hours. Mu Yu didn't dare to do anything else, afraid that if something unexpected happened, he wouldn't be able to deal with it in time. However, the black and white chi in the so close, yet worlds apart formation gradually decreased. In the end, they were all absorbed by the body tree formed by Mu Ling. The body tree, which was originally yellow and emaciated, seemed to have regained its vitality. Its branches and leaves became verdant, and all the holes had healed. The body tree swayed gently in the air, and finally turned back into the Mu Ling sword. At this time, the wood spirit sword changed its appearance once again. Its body was originally riddled with holes, but now those holes had disappeared, and it had turned into an intact sword. The two sides of the sword were white, but there were black stripes in the middle of the sword. At the end of the sword hilt, there were black and white yin-yang fishes flowing. Overall, black and white occupied the sword. Furthermore, the sword was no longer broken. On the contrary, it became very charming, and there was an indescribable power contained in it. The Mu Ling sword hummed softly, and made a crisp sound. The sword tip was extremely sharp, like a divine weapon. It became very unfamiliar to Mu Yu. Mu Yu's mind moved, and the Mu Ling sword felt Mu Yu's summon. It left the formation and flew towards Mu Yu. Mu Yu grabbed the sword. Wang! A terrifying aura suddenly came from the Mu Ling sword into Mu Yu's body. This aura seemed to have been immersed in the battlefield for many years, and it was a bloody and evil aura that could only be obtained after killing countless people. This aura entered Mu Yu's mind, and caused a tremendous change in Mu Yu's body. He found that he suddenly had an unconcealable desire for blood in his heart. He wanted to kill. Mu Yu's eyes changed again. His left eye was suffused with a white light, and his right eye was flashing with a black light. His body also emitted a cold and emotionless spiritual energy fluctuation. Life became so fragile in his eyes, and this power made him feel very satisfied. He even felt that he should balance the world according to his own ideas. He should let the people who deserved to die die, and let the people who deserved to live live. He wanted to be the master of life. Mu Yu was immersed in this power, but this time he did not lose himself. On the contrary, he was very clear-headed. He suddenly realized something and quickly let go of the Mu Ling sword. "What's wrong? Mu Yu, I feel like you just..." Little Shuai asked hesitantly. He and Long Ting were originally on Mu Yu's shoulder, But the moment Mu Yu held the Mu Ling sword, a cold killing intent spread out from Mu Yu's body. It made little Shuai and Long Ting's hearts palpitate, and they involuntarily flew out. The power of slaughter. Mu Yu slowly exhaled. Looking at the Mu Ling sword in front of him, he suddenly felt a surge of emotion. That's right, this was the power of slaughter. Mu Yu was extremely certain because back in the Moyun mountain range, the old tree chief had once touched Mu Yu's body with a terrifying power. At that time, Mu Yu had almost lost control and wanted to endlessly kill to satisfy his thirst for blood. When the Mu Ling sword came into contact with Mu Yu just now, the power was just as cold. The only difference was that when the old tree chief came into contact with his power, Mu Yu could not maintain his consciousness. However, the power of slaughter from the Mu Ling sword made Mu Yu extremely clear-headed. He already understood why the Mu Ling sword would take the initiative to absorb the black and white gas. It was because the black and white gas were devouring thousands of flesh-winged horned monsters. The entire prison's flesh-winged horned monsters were devoured by the death aura and life aura. This was equivalent to creating a massacre. In order to repair Mu Ling's injuries, he needed to kill. Back when Mu Yu separated the underworld grass, the black and white gas only devoured the furniture in a room and did not devour any life. Therefore, the Mu Ling sword did not take the initiative to absorb it. And this time, all of the black and white energies had grown by devouring the flesh-winged horned monsters. These energies contained tens of thousands of lives. In order for the wood spirit sword to repair itself, it needed the power of slaughter to replenish itself. Mu Yu thought that he would have a long way to go to repair Mu Ling's injuries, but he did not expect that those flesh-winged horned monsters would become the source of his power of slaughter. With the power of slaughter, he could destroy the balance of the 5 elements in a person's body and unlock the 9th heaven sealing demon formation. Chapter 726. The power of slaughter was the key to unlocking the 9 heavens demon sealing formation. It could also allow Mu Yu's cultivation to skyrocket. However, Mu Yu hesitated because he didn't like the power that thirsted for blood. Although he was able to keep his consciousness clear after coming into contact with the power of slaughter this time, the feeling of the power of slaughter made him very cold and manic. He even found that the lives of those related to him didn't seem that important. Including Deadwood Daddy. After coming into contact with the power of slaughter, Mu Yu's heart began to have a mentality of indifference towards life. He believed that only those who had his permission could live. However, he couldn't recognize the dividing line between the two. Who should live the most? For a moment, he thought of Deadwood Daddy, but the idea of reviving Deadwood Daddy seemed to be insignificant in his heart. Slaughter made him very tyrannical, but it also made him lose his original intention. He was very worried that if he used this power, under the imperceptible influence, would there be a day when he would become numb? Mu Yu clenched his fists. Mu Yu, this time, do you plan to try to guide Mu Ling's power to unlock the 9 heavens demon sealing formation? Little Commander asked. Mu Yu's expression wavered. He pondered for a long time before finally shaking his head. I can't accept this power right now. Then Deadwood Daddy, after we find Soul Return and repair Deadwood Daddy's soul, I will use the power of slaughter to unlock the 9 heavens demon sealing formation. I will use the power of life and death in the blink of an eye. If I use it now, I'm worried that my nature will be changed, Mu Yu said calmly. Unlocking the 9 heavens demon sealing formation wasn't urgent because Deadwood Daddy's soul hadn't recovered yet. Mu Yu cast his gaze back to Mu Ling's sword. He didn't want to touch it again. Can you retract that power? Mu Yu asked Mu Ling. Mu Ling's sword trembled slightly. Its body flashed with black and white light. The light flowed, but it transmitted a thought that it couldn't do it. It had already become a sword of slaughter. It had the aura of slaughter. This aura could make Mu Yu stronger, but it would also affect Mu Yu. Let it return to the Shadow Clone Sword. The Shadow Clone Sword can prevent it from coming into contact with you. However, if you don't want to use Mu Ling, it means that you can no longer make Mu Ling transform into plants, Little Commander said. Many times, Mu Ling would instantly transform into various plants to help fight against opponents. Moreover, when dealing with the people from the Gate of Hell, Mu Yu relied on Mu Ling's death aura to suppress the ghostly aura of the people from the gate of hell. When Mu Yu couldn't block an attack, he would directly hide in Mu Ling and let Mu Ling take the fatal blow for him. However, now that Mu Ling had become a complete sword, its body was filled with a murderous aura. If Mu Yu didn't want to be affected by it, he couldn't rely on Mu Ling anymore. After suddenly losing Mu Ling's help, Mu Yu felt a little disappointed. It was as if he had lost a beloved friend. Right now, he could still control trees, and he could also control seeds to grow into towering trees. However, compared to the wood spirit's ability to transform at will, he was still far from being able to do so. Mu Ling could sense Mu Yu's rejection. It also emitted a very disappointed thought, but it still merged with the Shadow Clone Sword. Little Commander took the Shadow Clone Sword. A green light flashed across the Shadow Clone Sword. Then, he handed the sword to Mu Yu. The sword was still the same sword, but it lacked the aura that made Mu Yu happy. Plans can never keep up with changes, right? Now that the crisis of death aura and life aura has been resolved, and the problem of the flesh-winged horned monsters has been resolved, all that's left is to deal with the two old Japanese. Dragon vines stretched and landed on Mu Yu's shoulder again. That's right. Mu Yu smiled. Originally, he had planned to use the reincarnation seal to collect the death aura and life aura before throwing them into the spatial barrier below Mass Burial Valley. Now, it seemed that there was no need for that. Mu Ling's sword had helped him solve everything. Just as they were focusing on the spirit terminating no immortal domain, Mu Yu's expression suddenly changed. This was because the shadows of Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming had long disappeared from the 46th floor. Where did those two Japanese guys go? Mu Yu was shocked. Then, he quickly discovered a serious problem. This was because he realized that the spirit terminating no immortal domain had started to become dangerous. A hole had appeared in the runes there. Although the hole did not spread, it was that hole that allowed Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming to escape. At this moment, the two of them had actually escaped to the first floor through the void. What annoyed Mu Yu the most was that the runes at the exit of the first floor had also been damaged. What's going on? Long Teng and Xiao Shuai were equally puzzled. Earlier, because Mu Ling had rushed in to fight with the life and death aura, they had focused all their attention on Mu Ling. For a moment, they did not pay attention to the situation in the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda. Originally, they thought that after dealing with the threat of life aura and death aura, they would go to the spirit terminating no immortal domain to find Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming to settle the score. Unexpectedly, the two of them had suddenly escaped. Mu Yu carefully sensed the runes of the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda and discovered a very serious problem. After the runes of the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda were affected by the life aura, all the runes became very active. This caused some of the runes to run wrong, causing the runes to crack. The runes on the spirit terminating no immortal level were also affected because of this. Although the white life aura had been removed from the runes in order to fight against the death aura, the hidden danger had already been planted, allowing Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming to escape. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming were at the first entrance. They had already found the crack in the runes and were working together to attack it. Can we stop them? Xiao Shuai asked. Mu Yu shook his head. The Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda is already too damaged. It can't help us trap the two of them anymore. Boom. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming worked together to attack the crack again. The runes trembled. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the crack expanded to the point where it would be difficult for them to escape. Mu Yu's mind moved, and the first level's exit automatically appeared. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming stopped attacking the crack and left the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda through the exit. So we're just going to let them go. Long Teng said unwillingly. If we don't let them go, they will damage the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda even more. We can't just run in front of them and stop them, can we? Mu Yu said in a low voice. He had to admit that because he had to deal with the problem caused by the death aura, he had missed the best opportunity to deal with the people from the Gate of Hell. Now that the Kraken King was under Gui Yezi's control, he had to think of another way to free the Kraken King. It looked like only Boss Lu could do that. Since Boss Lu has the Kraken King's blood, let's go find his body first. Mu Yu quickly searched through every level of the Yarrow ceiling pagoda in his mind, and finally found Boss Lu and the dragon turtle on the 31st level. Boss Lu was lying on the ground, no longer breathing. There was a shocking bloody hole in his forehead, and his eyes were wide open. He had died with a grievance. Mu Yu's mind moved, and he turned around to Boss Lu's side. He's dead. Even if he had anything on him, the ghost leopard must have stolen it, Long Ting said regretfully. Mu Yu carefully examined Boss Lu. Boss Lu's body was cold and stiff, and he had been dead for at least 2 days. But Mu Yu made a soft sound of surprise, and found something amiss. Boss Lu's body looked dead in every way, and Mu Yu was very sensitive to the fluctuations of life force. He was surprised to find that the body still had a bit of life force left. This life force was extremely weak, and if not for Mu Yu's powerful senses, he would not have noticed it. He's not dead yet. Mu Yu looked at the bloody hole in Boss Lu's forehead. The shocking wound had already formed a scab, as if a strange power was slowly healing it. He thought for a moment, and found that the life force in Boss Lu's body was showing signs of recovery. He immediately used his spiritual power to help Boss Lu guide the life force. 2 hours later, Boss Lu opened his eyes. His consciousness was still blurry, but he suddenly remembered something. His body twitched, and he tried to stand up in a panic. "It's okay, Boss Lu, it's me," Mu Yu said. Boss Lu saw Mu Yu clearly, and was pleasantly surprised. "Is it Mu Yu? I thought it was someone from the gate of hell." He panted weakly, and reached out to touch the bloody hole in his forehead. His heart was still beating fast. "Are you okay?" Mu Yu helped Boss Lu up. To be able to survive such a fatal injury, Boss Lu must have some secrets. "Ah, Ghost Leopard ambushed us. I had the White Ape ancestors' life-saving treasure, so I pretended to be dead and escaped. Unfortunately, Dragon Turtle was not so lucky." Boss Lu looked regretfully at Dragon Turtle's cold corpse, and he shook his head and sighed. "The situation is bad now. Xiao Shui said that you have the key to saving Sea Goblin King. We need to find Ghost Realm." Mu Yu told Boss Lu about Sea Goblin King. Originally, Boss Lu was very excited when he heard that Sea Goblin King had escaped, but when Mu Yu told him that Sea Goblin King had become Ghost Realm's body, Boss Lu was shocked. How could this be? How could someone from the Gate of Hell control Sea Goblin King? Boss Lu was very anxious. He came for Sea Goblin King. If Sea Goblin King was controlled by someone from the Gate of Hell, the situation would be very bad. What's the use of being anxious now? Even the sea-calming Thousand Ruler was stolen. "Damn it," Dragon Vine muttered unhappily. Boss Lu lowered his head and said guiltily, "Lord True Dragon, I am sorry. I am useless. The people from the Gate of Hell are very strange. You were unlucky to have met them. Now, the people from the Gate of Hell have already controlled Sea Goblin King. Boss Lu, do you have Sea Goblin King's blood on you?" This was what Mu Yu wanted. Sea Goblin King only had his own blood, so he could escape the control of the blood demon puppet and take back his body. "I do, but, if you do, then hurry up and take it out," Mu Yu said. Boss Lu smiled bitterly and said, "Sea Goblin King's blood flows in my body." When Boss Lu said this, everyone was a little surprised. Mu Yu looked at Boss Lu in confusion. "You are the descendant of Sea Goblin King?" Sea Goblin King said he was Black Tortoise. Little Shui thought Black Tortoise was a turtle. Although Sea Goblin King denied it, Black Tortoise was definitely not a deer. Boss Lu shook his head and said, "No, Old Turtle and I were originally souls guarding the teleportation array in the second sky. In order to save Lord Sea Goblin King this time, the White Ape ancestor found 2 bodies. With Sea Goblin King's blood as a guide, he used a secret technique to resurrect Old Turtle and me in these 2 bodies. As long as Sea Goblin King strips Old Turtle's or my blood, he can be reborn." Mu Yu frowned. Some of the techniques of the goblin race sounded very uncomfortable. "Did he have to store the blood in the body?" Mu Yu asked. "Yes, before Sea Goblin King was sealed, he sent his blood to the teleportation array in the second sky. Originally, there was a special array there to cultivate his blood, but when the blood left the array, it was easy to have problems. So he had no choice but to use Old Turtle and me. Only in this way can the blood be perfectly preserved, Boss Lu said. Every Goblin King before being sealed would send out their most important things. White Ape Goblin King's internal elixir, Sand Eagle Goblin King's heart, Sea Goblin King's blood, so it was not strange. As for why Sea Goblin King had to teleport to the second sky, it was because the whole island had been sealed by Reverend Xian Jizzy. He had no other choice. After a long silence, Mu Yu said, "So when Sea Goblin King is resurrected, you will die." When Boss Lu's body ran out of blood, it was equivalent to the body running out of life force. His soul would float out. Without the protection of the Demon Clan's array formation in the second Sky Island, Boss Lu's soul would soon lose consciousness. "Sacrificing ourselves for Lord Sea Goblin King, this is my and Old Turtle's honor," Boss Lu said solemnly. When he said this, he did not hesitate at all. For Boss Lu, this was his mission. Obviously, he was prepared to sacrifice himself long ago. He was willing to exchange his life for Sea Goblin King's resurrection. Mu Yu shook his head. Boss Lu was willing to sacrifice himself for Sea Goblin King. He was indeed a loyal Goblin race member. And Old Turtle, whose whereabouts were unknown, was also a similar person. Although these two guys were strange and had once tricked Mu Yu for almost a year when he was in the second sky, their loyalty to the true dragon and Sea Goblin King was enough to make Mu Yu feel respect. Compared to the cowards in Dragonstar Fall who sought refuge with the Gate of Hell in order to survive, this was a world of difference. Chapter 727. Mu Yu, hurry up and take me out of here. As long as I can see Mr. Siren King's body, he will be able to sense the blood in my body. Then, I will be able to wake him up, Boss Lu said in a hurry. Mu Yu nodded. At this time, the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda had not lifted the seal on the entire island, but he was sure that Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming had not left the island yet. After all, Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming knew that they had to rely on Mu Yu to find soul transference. Before Mu Yu was captured, the people from the Gate of Hell would not give up so easily. He took Boss Lu and left this floor, then returned to the 81st floor to pick up Xiao Shui. At the same time, Mu Yu found the other members of the demon race. He found Long Yeli and Yi Wenmaro, who had gone through the wrong passage. The rest of the demon race had been devoured by the death aura. He Zipping was a hippopotamus. He did not enter the tower, but stood guard outside in case of an emergency. But now that the island had been bathed in blood, he was most likely dead. Mu Yu also found a severed soul stage member from the Gate of Hell. He was running around the tower, but because the tower's exit had been destroyed, he could not find the exit. Mu Yu did not hesitate to kill this fish that had escaped the net. There was no need to show mercy. 11 people from the Gate of Hell had entered the tower, but 4 of them had been killed by Mu Yu. The rest of the people from the Gate of Hell had died in the death aura. Only Gui Xieming and Gui Leopard had left the tower. Now, there were still 4 people from the Gate of Hell on the island. Mu Yu gathered the rest of the demon race. Although they outnumbered the people from the Gate of Hell, they were not enough to kill Gui Yezi. Xiao Shui did not want Mu Yu to put himself in danger. Only then could the tower protect them. But this stalemate was not a solution. He could only believe that Boss Lu could subdue Gui Yezi and chase him out of the Siren King's body. Then, he could rely on the Siren King, who had recovered his powers, to deal with Gui Yeming. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming were waiting at the entrance of the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda. They did not believe that Mu Yu would die so easily from the terrifying aura of death. Mu Yu took a deep breath. After discussing the matter with the others, he left the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda. Gui Yezi and the others were waiting for him. "You're really lucky, you're still alive." Gui Yezi sneered as he watched Mu Yu walk out of the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda alone. His body was still brimming with killing intent. Mu Yu's appearance had given him too many surprises and disrupted many of his plans. Gui Yezi hated Mu Yu to the bone. "The two of you are quite tough as well. You didn't get devoured by the deathly aura." Mu Yu felt a little regretful. If he could control the aura of death as he wished, he would have dealt with these 2 people long ago. He would not have caused so much trouble. "So, are you willing to take us to find the soul transference, or do I have to do it myself?" Gui Yezi looked high and mighty. In his eyes, Mu Yu could not do much, and there was no way he could escape from the four of them. Before we go looking for the soul transference, there is one more thing that needs to be done. Mu Yu looked at Gui Yezi closely. Are you talking about how to leave this island? Don't worry, we already have a way to leave this place, Gui Yezi said confidently. Mu Yu shook his head. It's not about how to leave this place. It's about time you returned the body to its rightful owner. As soon as Mu Yu finished speaking, Boss Lu flashed out from behind him and bit his finger. Two thin lines of blood intersected in the air, forming a complicated demon totem. It was exactly the same as the one Mu Yu saw at the entrance of the demon race's holy road. This totem was heptagonal, with a throne in the middle. The throne seemed to be made up of coral reefs, and there were many strange shapes on it. In the eyes of Xiao Shuai and Long Teng, it was ugly graffiti. At this time, Boss Lu's body lit up with a white light. The blood vessels under his skin bulged, and the blood flowed rapidly on them as if they were boiling. Boss Lu's aura suddenly became incomparably majestic, as if something supreme was about to come out of his body. Gui Yezi looked at Boss Lu with disdain. What? Do you really think a mere body integration stage demon can defeat us? But before he could finish, his expression changed drastically. His body began to tremble uneasily, and his blood began to resonate with Boss Lu's. Damn it, Gui Yeming, kill that demon. Gui Yezi roared, and a blood-red fog rose from his body, enveloping him. He wanted to cut off his connection with Boss Lu's blood, but the suppressed Siren King was stimulated by his own blood, and began to resist. Mu Yu, don't let them interrupt me. Boss Lu gritted his teeth, and a pained expression appeared on his face. But the blood totem in front of him was still glowing with a strange light, trying to awaken the Siren King. Mu Yu looked at the charging Gui Yeming with a serious expression. There was no time to hesitate, and he had to protect Boss Lu from harm. He had wanted to let Boss Lu use this technique in the Demon Sealing Pagoda, but the Demon Sealing Pagoda would isolate all auras. Now that the Demon Sealing Pagoda was severely damaged, even Mu Yu could not do this. Everyone, try to stall for time. Don't fight recklessly, Mu Yu shouted. Xiao Shui, Long Yeli, and Yi Wenmao all rushed out and faced Gui Yeming together with Mu Yu. However, Gui Yeming was a transcending tribulation cultivator from the ghost sect. His aura was still too strong for the four of them. Gui Yeming merely raised his hand, and all of them spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying. At this time, Gui Bao and Gui Shiming also attacked together, ready to kill the people in the way. You guys deal with Gui Bao and Gui Shiming. I'll stop Gui Yeming, Mu Yu said. But you. Xiao Shui wanted to help Mu Yu, but Mu Yu was already far away. At this time, Gui Shiming's spirit chain was thrown at her, and she had to dodge. Boss Lu, hurry up. Mu Yu's cultivation was only at the severed soul stage. He only had the strength of a body fusion stage cultivator because of He Lienkong's soul armament. But against Gui Yeming, who was at the tribulation passing stage, he had no chance of winning. But the arrow had already been narked. If he did not protect Boss Lu and let Boss Lu be interrupted, everything would be for naught. Now, Boss Lu had at least used the secret technique of the Yarrow clan to delay Gui Yeming, so Gui Yeming could not do anything to them. This was the best news so far. Mu Yu had transferred the so close, yet worlds apart from the Yarrow Sealing Pagoda to himself. He could only rely on this formation now. When Gui Yeming saw Mu Yu coming at him, he did not care about Mu Yu at all. His hand formed a gloomy ghost claw, and he continued to grab Boss Lu. Your opponent is me. Mu Yu's fingers moved continuously. The formation runes spread out with him as the center, covering Boss Lu in an instant. At the same time, Gui Yeming's ghost claw fell on Boss Lu. So close, yet worlds apart was unleashed. Gui Yeming was about to grab Boss Lu, but he was still a hair's breadth away. What a powerful formation! Gui Yeming retracted his ghost claw and looked coldly at Mu Yu. His lips curled into a mocking smile. You want to stop me alone? Mu Yu looked at so close, yet worlds apart. This formation should have been more than enough to stop Gui Yeming, but because the Pagoda Genie had used it to stop the death aura from spreading, much of its power had been consumed by the aura. Now, the formation's power had been greatly reduced. Mu Yu could not guarantee how many times he could block Gui Yeming's attacks. So, he could only use this formation on Boss Lu, while he faced the tribulation Gui Yeming alone. At least I won't let you people from the gate of hell get away with it so easily. Mu Yu held his sword horizontally in front of his chest, pointing it at Gui Yeming. What right do you have to say that? As soon as Gui Yeming finished speaking, he suddenly appeared behind Mu Yu. Ghost aura rolled out from his body, and a powerful spiritual force swept out. What incredible speed! Mu Yu had mentally prepared himself, but a tribulation Gui Yeming's cultivation was still far beyond his expectations. But the Yarrow ceiling pagoda shone again, and the spirit terminating no immortal domain was moved behind him. Gui Yeming's tribulation Gui Yeming's ghost aura disappeared without a trace after entering the spirit terminating no immortal domain. Mu Yu was not happy to be able to control the spirit terminating no immortal domain, because it had been greatly damaged. It was no longer a complete formation, so it could not exert its suppressive power. The power of the Yarrow ceiling pagoda's domain? It looks like everything that happened in the Yarrow ceiling pagoda was your doing. Gui Yeming's expression darkened. Just now, he and Gui Yezi had tried to escape the death aura. But every time they reached the exit of the Yarrow ceiling pagoda, something happened. It was as if they had been set up on purpose. In the end, they were trapped in the spirit terminating no immortal domain. If the formation runes hadn't been damaged, they wouldn't have been able to escape. The spirit terminating no immortal domain enveloped Mu Yu and Gui Yeming, using the Yarrow ceiling pagoda's power to forcibly trap Gui Yeming. However, Mu Yu found it very troublesome. Mu Yu was using the domain, but he was also restricted by it. So you don't have complete control over this domain. You can't completely suppress my cultivation. Gui Yeming approached Mu Yu step by step. The domain's power could no longer make them lose their cultivation. Instead, it forcefully suppressed their cultivation by an entire realm. Even so, Gui Yeming's cultivation was still higher than Mu Yu's. He was close to the 9th heavenly layer of the body integration stage, while Mu Yu was only at the out-of-body stage. He relied on He Lienkong's soul tool to forcibly raise his aura to the 1st heavenly layer of the spirit severing stage. However, after suppressing Gui Yeming's cultivation, he no longer had the terrifying pressure of a tribulation passing stage cultivator. Xiao Shui and Long Ting leapt out from Mu Yu's body and rushed out to help Xiao Shui. The two of them were also restricted by this domain. Only by leaving here to help Xiao Shui could they unleash their full power. A severed soul stage cultivator against a body integration stage cultivator? Gui Yeming didn't panic. The rules of this domain were fair to everyone. He still had the advantage. Chapter 728. Bang! Mu Yu was sent flying. He slammed into the barrier of the end spirit no immortal domain. The barrier trembled. It was on the verge of collapsing. Blood trickled down the corner of Mu Yu's mouth. The difference in their cultivation levels was too great. Mu Yu did not dare use the Mu Ling. This meant that Mu Yu could not restrain Gui Yeming's ghost aura. This allowed Gui Yeming to use his ghost techniques without restraint. After just one exchange, Mu Yu was already badly injured. But Mu Yu quickly stood up. The shadow swords hummed around him, ready to attack. Gui Yeming did not give Mu Yu any chance to catch his breath. He flashed to Mu Yu's side again. The ghost aura turned into sharp ghost awls. They were aimed at Mu Yu's vital points. Every ghost awl glowed with a dark light. These ghost awls were specifically used to attack the soul. Once the soul was frozen, Mu Yu would not be able to move. But Mu Yu waved his hand and runes floated out. They gathered before his chest to form a white rune. The white rune instantly formed a water ripple. It was like a mirror, sucking in all the ghost awls. But soon, cracks appeared on the water ripple. With a splash, the water ripple shattered. All the ghost awls appeared again, heading for Mu Yu. But Mu Yu had already flashed away. The ghost awls pierced the ground, creating small holes. Wisps of black gas rose out of them. Mu Yu tapped the ground with his feet. The shadow swords in his hand carried golden runes as they charged forward. The 9 shadow swords stabbed at Gui Yeming from different angles. The horizon neighbor array made the shadow swords' trajectories illusory. They were clearly still some distance away, but in the blink of an eye, they were right in front of Gui Yeming. Humph. It's not enough for you to do that. Gui Yeming was not flustered by Mu Yu's shadow swords. The twins rushed out of his body and blocked all the shadow swords. Gui Yeming once again crossed the distance and slammed his palm into Mu Yu's chest. Bang! Mu Yu was sent flying again. My strength is still too weak. Mu Yu gritted his teeth. Even when his cultivation wasn't suppressed, it was still very difficult for him to defend against a body integration stage cultivator's attack. Even if Gui Yeming's cultivation was suppressed, he was still several times stronger than Gui Shifei. At this moment, Mu Yu did not have any extravagant hopes of killing Gui Yeming. He only needed to stall for time. Looking through the array, Boss Lu's face was flushed red. Gui Yez's angry roars could still be heard from time to time. Mu Yu wasn't sure if Boss Lu would succeed, but he had to take a gamble. It's not a good time to be distracted during a fight. Gui Yeming attacked Mu Yu again. Mu Yu was once again slammed into the barrier of the domain. Gui Yeming, what are you doing? Hurry up and kill that demon. Gui Yez's angry voice rang out again. Gui Yeming's body stopped in midair. He snorted coldly. Kid, I'll deal with you later. As he spoke, Gui Yeming had already formed a blood-red spear. The spear reeked of blood, as if it had been soaked in the blood of thousands of people. The spear turned into a long rainbow and slammed into the barrier of the spirit terminating no immortal domain. Bang! The entire spirit terminating no immortal domain trembled violently. The power of the domain was actually disrupted. Bang! The second spear thrust. A small crack appeared on the surface of the domain. Bang! The third spear thrust, and the crack began to spread. The entire domain was on the verge of collapse. Damn it, we have to stop him. Mu Yu struggled to get up from the ground. The array formation domain was already in tatters. Now that it was being attacked by Gui Yeming, it was reaching its limit. With Mu Yu's familiarity with this domain, he was certain that the domain would not be able to withstand Gui Yeming's fifth attack. Bang! The fourth spear thrust, and the domain's barrier was on the verge of collapse. However, it was still suppressing their cultivation levels. I've said it before. Your opponent is me. Mu Yu shouted coldly. The shadow clone sword in his hand had already changed color. The blade was white with black sword runes. A ferocious aura rolled out from Mu Yu's hand, covering Mu Yu's entire body. A cold feeling swept through Mu Yu's mind once more. The aura of slaughter flowed through his body. He felt as if he had transformed into a god of slaughter, the ruler of all life in the world. The murderous intent that looked down on all life made his blood boil. Gui Yeming's spear thrust forward again, but this time, the spear did not touch the barrier. Instead, it was stopped by a white sword tip. Kid, you're looking for. Gui Yeming impatiently turned his head. He wanted to kill Mu Yu, but he was met with Mu Yu's strange eyes. Gui Yeming's heart skipped a beat. Even someone like him, who had killed countless people, felt his heart palpitate. Mu Yu's eyes no longer resembled those of a normal person. His eyes had completely transformed into a black and white aura. Each eye was like a black and white aura that spun around each other, forming the shape of a yin-yang fish. The aura of slaughter pulsed through Mu Yu's body. He was like a demon that had emerged from the depths of hell. His entire body was covered in a terrifying aura of blood. Ding! Mu Ling's sword easily repelled Gui Yeming's spear. The white blade emitted a pure aura of death that absorbed all the blood and ghostly aura on the spear. Crash! Gui Yeming looked at his blood-colored spear in disbelief. It seemed as if its spiritual energy had been sucked dry by something. It had lost its blood-colored luster. With just a bit of force, it broke into several pieces and fell to the ground. What? Gui Yeming was furious. This spear had been refined with countless blood souls. It had been nourished by his tribulation stage cultivation. It had long reached an indestructible state. However, Mu Yu's strange sword had just touched it and it had turned into a pile of scrap metal. Kid, you dare destroy my magic treasure. Gui Yeming was furious, but the aura of slaughter emanating from Mu Ling's sword shocked him. To be honest, with his tribulation stage cultivation, he had killed no less than 10,000 self-cultivators. However, his aura of slaughter was not as terrifying as this. Just how many people had Mu Ling's sword killed? Not only will I destroy your magic treasure, but I will also kill you. Mu Yu slowly opened his mouth. His voice was like ice that had not melted in 1,000 years. Every word contained a cold killing intent. Even someone like Gui Yeming, who had been tainted by countless resentful souls, felt his hair stand on end. This was a killing intent that could only be obtained after experiencing the slaughter of tens of thousands of people. However, Mu Yu was Jianying Chenfeng's disciple. How could he have killed so many people? What Gui Yeming did not know was that Mu Ling's aura of slaughter came from the tens of thousands of flesh-winged horned monsters. The flesh-winged horned monsters were extremely powerful. They were also ferocious and terrifying creatures. Their life force was extremely tenacious. The life force of a flesh-winged horned monster was equivalent to the life force of several hundred self-cultivators. When all the flesh-winged horned monsters were devoured by the aura of death and life, and Mu Ling devoured the aura of death and life, it was equivalent to creating an endless slaughter. Insolence! Die! Gui Yeming roared. Ghost fog once again rose from his body. The ghost fog turned into a sinister ghost claw that grabbed at Mu Yu. This claw still had the power of a 9th heavenly layer body fusion stage cultivator. If a mountain was in front of him, it would be easily shattered. Mu Yu's expression was cold. The aura of death continuously flowed from Mu Ling's sword into Mu Yu's body. His cultivation was actually increasing step by step. The strength of his body was also increasing. When Gui Yeming's ghost claw was about to reach him, a black and white aura surged out of his body and met the ghost claw. When the insufferably arrogant ghost claw met the black and white auras, it rapidly withered and dissipated like snow. It was as if it had evaporated into thin air, leaving not a single trace behind. Gui Yeming's eyes widened. He never thought that his sure-kill attack would be so weak in front of Mu Yu. How did Mu Yu, who couldn't beat him in the beginning, become so strong all of a sudden? What on earth had happened to him? After Mu Ling's sword absorbed the aura of death and life force, its aura was the natural nemesis of evil things like ghost aura. When that seemingly incomparably powerful ghost claw came into contact with Mu Ling's aura, it couldn't maintain its form at all. It was inevitable that it would be shattered. Mu Yu's aura was still rising. When the aura of death entered his body, it could actually strengthen his cultivation. He enjoyed this process very much. The spiritual energy in his body seemed to be resonating with Mu Ling's sword, circulating faster and faster. In just a few breaths, Mu Yu's strength had reached the 1st heavenly layer body fusion stage. Life and death are all under my control. Mu Yu seemed to be pronouncing Gui Yeming's death sentence. Every word struck Gui Yeming's heart, causing him to be extremely terrified. Gui Yeming no longer hesitated. He knew that if he continued to be trapped in this end spirit no immortal domain, he would become a soul under Mu Yu's sword sooner or later. He immediately turned around, raised all the strength in his body, and blasted at the crack in the domain barrier. But when he turned around, Mu Ling's sword was like a ghost. It materialized from the runes in the void and slashed down at Gui Yeming's arm. Kai! A severed arm wrapped in ghost aura flew through the air, sprinkling dark red blood. It was a ghastly sight. Ah! Gui Yeming let out a heart-wrenching scream. If it was just a severed arm, he wouldn't have felt such pain. The reason he couldn't endure this pain was because he felt that the arm on his soul had also been severed. That's right. It was a wound to the soul. As a member of the Gate of Hell who dealt with souls all year round, Gui Yeming couldn't be more familiar with soul wounds. Not only did this sword cut off his physical arm, it also cut off his soul arm. Chapter 729. How can you have such a vicious sword technique? Gui Yeming's eyes were filled with panic. He was a tribulation passing stage cultivator. It was one thing for him to be suppressed to the 9th firmament of the body integration stage, but he couldn't even defeat someone at the 1st firmament of the body integration stage. Vicious sword technique? How can you say something like that? Mu Yu said coldly. People from the Devil's Gate killed people and extracted their souls, causing them to never be able to reincarnate. There were countless spells that targeted the soul. With such intolerable spells, how could he still have the nerve to say that other people's sword techniques were vicious? One less person from the gate of hell is one less scourge in the world. Mu Yu's consciousness was very clear. He could control the death aura that entered his body. He could remember everything. The only difference was that his emotions were suppressed. His state of mind was calm. There was only life and death in his mind. The pain in his soul caused Gui Yeming's face to turn pale. He forced himself to suppress the pain. This was not an easy task. The pain in his soul made him feel like he didn't want to die. In addition, Gui Yeming's cultivation was being suppressed. He was thinking that he had to leave this domain. Don't be too arrogant. Even though Gui Yeming had lost an arm, he still raised his other hand and smashed it at the crack in the domain barrier. As long as he could escape from this broken domain, he would be able to recover his cultivation. Even if he was heavily injured, he would be able to kill Mu Yu. At this time, Mu Ling's sword followed him like a shadow and chopped down at his remaining arm. This time, he was prepared. He retracted his arm in the air and avoided the danger of losing another arm. Spiritual energy gathered in his feet. He turned around and kicked the broken part of the domain barrier. Boom! The barrier once again erupted with a soul-stirring tremor. The entire barrier shook. The aura of the outside world had already drilled in through the cracks and quickly spread out. The terrifying suppression had also gradually disappeared. Gui Yeming's transcending tribulation stage cultivation had returned to him. Break! Gui Yeming roared and shattered the broken domain into dust. But his waist was still hit by Mu Ling's sword at the last moment. A deep wound appeared on Gui Yeming's body. The wounds on his body were secondary. It was the wounds on his soul that made Gui Yeming's body tremble uncontrollably. He had always been the one to hurt the souls of others. This time, he finally experienced what it meant to hurt the soul. Brat, you broke my arm. This time, I want you dead. Gui Yeming's tribulation passing stage aura once again assaulted Mu Yu's body. After breaking free from the spiritless no immortal domain, Gui Yeming heaved a sigh of relief. Even if he lost an arm, he could still crush Mu Yu to death with a single slap with his tribulation passing stage cultivation. But when he looked at Mu Yu, his eyes narrowed. That was because Mu Yu's cultivation had risen to the peak of the 9th heavenly layer. The disappearance of the spiritless no immortal domain allowed Gui Yeming to return to the tribulation passing stage. But it also allowed Mu Yu to reach the body integration stage. Originally, he could rely on He Lienkong's soul armament to forcefully raise his cultivation to the body integration stage. After gaining control of the power of slaughter, Mu Yu's cultivation rose to the peak of the 9th heavenly layer. He was only a step away from the tribulation passing stage. Although his aura was only at the 9th heavenly layer, the baleful aura on his body was far stronger than an ordinary 9th heavenly layer. At this moment, Gui Yeming's soul was incomplete. He was suffering from unbearable pain. The wounds on his arms and waist were bleeding non-stop. The strange aura of Mu Ling's sword specifically targeted the ghostly aura on Gui Yeming's face. The aura of slaughter invaded Gui Yeming's body, causing him to feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He couldn't even circulate the ghostly aura in his body freely. Mu Ling's sword rippled in the air and returned to Mu Yu's hand. His brows were tightly knitted. The desire for slaughter was running rampant in his body, spreading to every inch of his meridians. He deeply liked this kind of power. Mu Ling's killing intent was very strong. Mu Yu's killing intent was also very strong. I don't mind adding you to the list of people I want to kill, Mu Yu said coldly. The tip of his sword slashed out again. The black and white sword chi intertwined in the air and chased after Gui Yeming. Gui Yeming was shocked to find that the two sword intents that Mu Yu had sent out were actually a threat to him. This was impossible in the past. Ever since he entered the crossing tribulation stage, no other body integration stage cultivator could enter his eyes. But now, he could really smell the scent of death. Bastard, don't look down on me. Gui Yeming's cultivation technique was too restrained. But after all, he was a famous crossing tribulation stage expert. His strength couldn't be underestimated. In addition, the speed and reaction of a crossing tribulation stage cultivator were relatively strong. He had already launched a counterattack. Gui Yeming's body dispersed, turning into a ghostly mist that filled the sky. At this moment, a blood-red bead floated out of the ghostly mist. This bead seemed to contain an independent world. Upon closer inspection, one could see mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. It was as if there was an azure world inside. The blood-li bead was refined in a place with extremely dense yin qi. It was a very terrifying ghost tool. Anyone who came into contact with it would turn into a pool of blood in the blink of an eye. Even their soul would be sucked into this bead. As soon as the blood-li bead appeared, the whole sky became oppressive. The sea breeze blew, mixed with a gloomy chill. The dark clouds in the sky began to gather, and soon formed the shape of a dark green skull. The skull's mouth was actually spitting out a black ghost python that was several hundred meters tall. The ghost python suddenly hissed and pounced towards Mu Yu. Wherever the ghost python went, the yin wind howled and ghost qi burst out. There seemed to be pitch-black cracks in the air. Those were the after-images left behind when the air was compressed to the extreme. The ghost python arrived in the blink of an eye and opened its bloody mouth. The python's mouth was like a pitch-black cave. It seemed that nothing on the demon island could escape from that mouth. On the demon island, except for Gui Yezi and Boss Lu, everyone had stopped. The black ghost python used by Gui Yeming covered the sky and the sun. A terrifying pressure swept over everyone. Even Gui Yeming and Gui Leopard retreated far away, not daring to be affected by this huge ghost python. At this time, only the thin and tall figure was left in the sky. He held a black and white long sword in his hand and faced the ghost python alone. The chilly wind blew at the hem of Mu Yu's clothes. His entire person became incomparably fierce, like a proud and aloof sword. In front of the monstrous ghost pythons, his figure suddenly seemed so tall and mighty. The world seemed to revolve with him as the center. All the yin wind was no longer blowing. Instead, it revolved around him. Countless green leaves floated in from nowhere. They were full of vitality but also contained endless killing intent. Mu Yu moved. The sword in his hand slashed through the air and suddenly divided into 9 swords. The 9 swords in the air began to evolve the 9 sword moves of the Heaven Sword 9 guides. The 9 sword moves were exquisite and domineering. Each sword move contained an incomparably biting cold sword qi. The sword qi overflowed in the air and formed 2 primordial yin and yang qi, one black and one white. Then, they chased and converged in front of him. At that moment, the 9 swords finally merged into one and then suddenly stabbed out. The sword stabbed into the yin and yang qi in front of Mu Yu. The yin and yang qi suddenly chased faster and faster, forming a black and white vortex. When the vortex spun to the limit, it suddenly separated and turned into a black and white long sword. The black long sword had a white edge and the white long sword had a black edge. They entangled and separated from each other, winding and spiraling, but with an incomparably terrifying sword qi and killing intent. They directly met the monstrous ghost python in the sky. Boom! The entire demon island shook as if there was a huge earthquake. The yin and yang sword qi instantly tore the ghost python apart. The insufferably arrogant ghost python was unable to withstand a single blow from the yin and yang sword qi. The blood phantasm bead was also invaded by the 2 different sword qi. With a bang, it exploded into fragments that filled the sky. The yin and yang sword qi didn't lose their momentum and continued to tremble as they blasted towards Gui Yeming. At this moment, Gui Yeming was completely unable to react. When he saw the yin and yang sword qi, that was the last thing he would see in this world. A 2-finger-thick wound appeared on Gui Yeming's forehead. No blood flowed out of the wound, but it was filled with the yin and yang qi. The sword qi didn't rush out from the back of his head but instead sank into his body. Gui Yeming didn't let out any scream. His entire body was already unable to move. His skin suddenly turned black and white, constantly changing. Finally, as if it was being decomposed, His entire body turned into fine powder that filled the sky and was swallowed by the yin and yang sword qi. Even his soul couldn't escape. The yin and yang sword qi soared into the sky, shattering the dark clouds that gathered above the demon island. The sun shone on the demon island once again, and then the sword qi spiraled back into Mu Ling's sword. The killing intent on Mu Ling's sword grew stronger by a notch. Lord Ghost King is dead. Gooey Leopard, who retreated, swallowed a mouthful of saliva and looked at all this in disbelief. That was a crossing calamity stage Ghost King, one of the few crossing calamity stage experts in the Gate of Hell. Usually, no one dared to provoke His Majesty. Even in the cultivation world, he had an illustrious reputation. But this Lord Ghost King who they usually revered was actually dead. Gooey Shimming was also shocked. Even if he fused with the Bloodrealm Devil Puppet, he was far from being a match for Gooey Yemming. At most, he wouldn't die for 7 days. But who would have thought that Mu Yu, whose cultivation was lower than his, could kill Gooey Yemming? That terrifying killing intent even made Gooey Shimming's heart palpitate. He knew that he couldn't resist it. The remaining 2 demon race members were also shocked. They looked at each other. They thought that today would be a bitter battle, but they didn't expect that Mu Yu, whose cultivation was only at the 9th layer of spirit severing stage, could directly kill a crossing calamity stage expert from the Gate of Hell. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. So this is the power of killing. Mu Yu's desire to kill rose again. He wanted to continue creating endless killing for the Mu Ling sword to strengthen himself. Only then could he become stronger and do what he wanted to do. The power of killing made him infatuated. He looked at the demon race members and the people from the Gate of Hell in the distance. He clenched the Mu Ling sword in his hand again. He wanted to use the people from the Gate of Hell to create more killing. This time, Mu Yu was sure that even the Bloodrealm Devil Puppet couldn't maintain its immortal body under the power of life and death. But at this moment, a sense of powerlessness suddenly came from his body. The black and white spiritual energy in his body seemed to have been sucked dry. The spiritual energy in his meridians was like gossamer and couldn't maintain his aura anymore. Is my energy exhausted? Then his consciousness began to blur. He couldn't stir up any spiritual energy in his body. His whole body fell down. Although the power of killing was strong, this power was far from what Mu Yu could control. His cultivation couldn't support this strong power at all. The spiritual energy in his body had been exhausted. However, at this time, Gooey Shimming, who only had one head, had appeared below Mu Yu. The ghost fog turned into a blood-red long axe. With a sharp whistling sound, it ruthlessly smashed towards Mu Yu's chest. Chapter 730. Stop. Xiao Shui roared furiously as she flew up and stood in front of Mu Yu, forcefully resisting Gooey Xiaming's attack. The water spirit coiled around Mu Yu and came into contact with the wood spirit sword. However, right at this moment, the energy of slaughter actually flowed along the water spirit and surged into Xiao Shui's body. That terrifying energy caused Xiao Shui's mind to be in chaos, as if someone was stirring her body. In an instant, a strange blue light appeared in Xiao Shui's eyes, and boundless murderous energy suddenly emerged from her body. Unlike Mu Yu, Xiao Shui didn't maintain her consciousness in this murderous energy. She seemed to have lost herself. She was like an ice beauty, standing in the air, so cold that people couldn't approach her. This murderous energy didn't belong to Xiao Shui, so she couldn't maintain her consciousness in this murderous energy. Just like how Mu Yu couldn't maintain his consciousness in the first place, Xiao Shui was also affected by Mu Yu's murderous energy. Icebound 1,000 miles. With a cold shout, the air of the entire demon island seemed to have solidified at a certain moment. Drops of water turned into icicles, snowflakes began to flutter, and the temperature suddenly dropped. It was as if the hottest days of summer had directly entered the cold winter. Everyone felt that their blood was about to freeze. Xiao Shui's whole body was covered with blue light. With the help of Mu Yu's murderous energy, her cultivation soared rapidly. Countless ice crystals instantly surrounded Gooey Sheshia. Ghosts cherished their lives. Even though they had killed countless people, under such a low temperature, they were still threatened. Blood souls emerged from his body and bombarded the ice crystal, tearing a hole in the ice crystal. His head turned into a blood shadow and rushed out. However, his blood souls did not move in the air. They were frozen by the terrifying low temperature. Qiao Shui's 1,000 miles of ice was simply too terrifying. Gui Zhenming had already experienced it once, so he didn't dare to receive it a second time. But with Qiao Shui's current physical condition, using the 1,000 miles of ice would cause her body to be ravaged by the low temperature. Without the help of Spirit Lord Shui Yumeng, Qiao Shui's usage of this ability was equivalent to harming herself while harming others. Her skin began to turn into ice crystals, and her entire body was gradually being eaten away by the ice crystals. These ice crystals had already covered Mu Yu's body. Mu Yu was already severely injured, and he could not circulate any spiritual energy in his body. At this moment, he could not resist this terrible cold. His body temperature was rapidly dropping, and his life was in danger. Qiao Shui, you're going to hurt Mu Yu even more. Little Shui had already leaped over. A sharp blade as thin as a cicada's wing popped out of its little hand. It drew a thin ray of light in the air and destroyed all the ice crystals in front of it. Then, it turned into a white light and jumped onto Mu Yu. Don't stop me from killing, Qiao Shui said emotionlessly. She raised her hand and chopped down at Little Shui, sending out a cold current. This killing intent belonged to Mu Yu, not Qiao Shui. After coming into contact with this killing intent, Qiao Shui would completely lose herself, unable to retain her consciousness. In her heart, there was only killing intent, and there was no distinction between friend and foe. She would not even let Little Shui off. This killing intent does not belong to you, quickly wake up. Little Shui shouted in a childish voice. Its fluffy tail swung about, dispersing the cold current around it. Its sharp claws reached out towards the water spirit. The water spirit's temperature was extremely low at this moment, but Little Shui was not afraid at all. With a swipe of its claws, it separated the water spirit and Mu Ling. Shua. That murderous aura suddenly disappeared like melting snow. It was quickly absorbed into the wood spirit, and the wood spirit turned back into a black and white flying sword. The water spirit also returned to its docile and lively appearance, gently floating in the air. However, the auras between them were still resonating with each other, as if they could not wait to be reunited. Who? Qiao Shui suddenly let out a long breath as she stared at the water spirit in surprise. The killing intent in her body that had caused her to lose control gradually dissipated, and the ice crystals in the air began to melt, causing the temperature to rise again. What happened just now? What did I do? Qiao Shui's chest heaved up and down as a look of panic appeared on her face, completely different from the cold and decisive person she had just been. It's nothing, you accidentally touched Mu Yu's killing intent. That killing intent belongs to Mu Yu, you can't control it, it's none of your business. Little Shui grabbed Mu Yu's clothes and pulled him away from the battlefield. Qiao Shui followed closely behind, a lingering fear filling her heart. Although she had lost consciousness, at that moment, her heart had been filled with infinite killing intent. This feeling still lingered in her mind. What was going on with that kind of power? Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard did not dare to act rashly. Mu Yu had suddenly killed Gui Yiming. This kind of strange ability was far beyond their imagination. Moreover, Qiao Shui's power was exactly the same as Mu Yu's. It was not something these two people from the Gate of Hell could contend against. Boss Lu was still fighting with Gui Yezi. At this moment, Boss Lu's entire body was covered in blood, the blood even seeping out of his skin. However, the blood did not soak his clothes, but instead flowed rapidly through his body, constantly merging with the totem in front of him. The light of the totem grew brighter and brighter, and Gui Yezi's roars became more and more hurried. He could no longer completely suppress the Sea Goblin King. What are you guys still standing there for? Hurry up and stop them. Gui Yezi also noticed that Gui Yiming had been killed, but he did not have time to be shocked because he could not even protect himself. The Sea Goblin King had been struggling to break free from his control, but he was bound by Boss Lu's demonic technique, so he could only shout at Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard. Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard looked at each other. They had no other choice but to bite the bullet and rush toward Qiao Shui and the others again. They did not know the source of the power, so they were still very afraid of Xiao Shui. Long Yeli and Yi Wenmaro also went up, transformed into their powerful bodies, and fought with the two people from the gate of hell. Little Shui, take care of Mu Yu. Xiao Shui tiptoed and rejoined the battlefield. Ying Yu and Long Ting also circled in the air, fighting fiercely with the two people from the gate of hell. However, without the killing power, Xiao Shui could no longer threaten Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard. Gui Shiming and the others obviously realized this, and their attacks became more and more fierce, once again gaining the upper hand. Let me see, Spirit Restoring Pill, Spirit Consolidating Pill, these are useless. How can the black and white spiritual power in your body be exhausted? Little Shui checked Mu Yu's injuries. At this time, Mu Yu's spiritual power had dried up. Originally, his body had an endless supply of black and white spiritual power, but it was all drained. Mu Yu's cultivation had returned to the 9th celestial layer of spirit severing stage. Mu Yu originally had two kinds of spiritual power, one black and one white, chasing each other in his dantian, and then flowing through his body. However, at this time, the black and white qi in his dantian seemed to have lost their power. They slowly rotated listlessly, unable to quickly recover the lost spiritual power. Right, myriad arts regression, pagoda spirit, pagoda spirit. Little Shui knocked on Mu Yu's body. A hazy and blurry beautiful figure flew out of Mu Yu's body. She stopped in the air, but her eyes looked very confused. Who are you? Are you calling me? After the suppressing demon tower was continuously damaged, her memory had become more and more blurred. She even forgot to see Little Shui once. It doesn't matter who I am. The suppressing demon tower has the domain power left by immortal Shen Jizi. Can you use this power on Mu Yu? Little Shui said quickly. Myriad arts regression domain? What's that? The pagoda spirit had actually forgotten this. Why are you even more stupid than me? No, I'm wrong. I'm not stupid. Why are you so stupid? He's your master now. You need to help him recover the lost spiritual power in his body, Little Shui said as he pointed at Mu Yu. Lost spiritual power? Won't it slowly recover on its own? The pagoda spirit asked in confusion. You didn't forget that. He can't recover his spiritual power in this state. On top of that, Xiao Shui's 1,000 miles of ice just now has worsened his internal injuries. Hurry up and help him. Little Shui urged urgently. What do I need to do? Myriad arts regression. You're the pagoda spirit. You must have some of Shen Jizi's domain power left behind. Oh. The pagoda spirit stretched out her slender hand. A white light appeared in her hand, and the power of the domain rolled out from her hand. It touched Mu Yu's dantian. Return to origin could restore everything to its original state. The pagoda spirit didn't have much of the domain power left. However, because Mu Yu was the master of the suppressing demon tower, this little bit of domain power was still useful to Mu Yu. The black and white qi in Mu Yu's dantian began to circulate faster. One black and one white spiritual power finally emerged from his dantian and flowed through Mu Yu's body. Although this spiritual power was very small, it still gradually stabilized Mu Yu's weak breathing, and the meridians in his body began to be filled with the spiritual power of the black pen. The spiritual power flowed through Mu Yu's body, wrapping around every part of Mu Yu's body. In the battle with Gui Yeming, his body was severely injured. At this moment, the black spiritual power was constantly devouring his wounds. The white spiritual power was gradually healing his damaged meridians and flesh. Mu Yu's body once again felt the pain of being bitten by 10,000 ants. Every time the black spiritual power devoured him, he would feel excruciating pain. He endured it while unconscious, but his aura was gradually recovering. His true cultivation was actually only at the 9th layer of the spirit severing stage. He had always relied on Helion Kong's soul armament to reach the body integration stage. However, at this moment, the black and white spiritual power in his body was constantly washing through his meridians. The black and white qi in his dantian was also constantly expanding. His entire dantian was also undergoing earth-shattering changes. His dantian was no longer purely a place to store and produce spiritual power. On the contrary, it had become a black and white mist. It was like two pure auras in the primordial chaos. They entangled with each other and fought for territory. Neither was willing to submit to the other and wanted to suppress the other. Mu Yu's meridians were constantly expanding. Then he felt like something in his body had suddenly combined together. A majestic and powerful force emerged from his body. This was the power of the body integration stage. He had already broken through to the body integration stage. However, this force was still growing. It was like a tide that had been squeezed for a long time and couldn't wait to be released. His whole body was like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon, surging rapidly. The spiritual power between heaven and earth also swept towards him frantically. He was like a powerful vortex, sucking all the spiritual power on the demon island. Wang. Chapter 731. Everyone was attracted by the commotion on Mu Yu's side. The moment Gui Shiming saw Mu Yu, his expression changed drastically. Mu Yu's original cultivation was only at the 9th celestial layer of spirit severing stage. It was enough to compete with him by relying on his soul weapon. This time, after breaking through to the combination stage, He Lienkong's soul weapon would make him even more powerful. You must die. Gui Shiming saw that Mu Yu was still breaking through. He couldn't let Mu Yu continue to cultivate. Now that Gui Yeming was dead, and Gui Yezi was entangled by Boss Lu's demonic art, if Mu Yu fully recovered, then today's plan would probably end in failure. Gui Shiming's strength was still higher than Qiao Shui and the others. The blood-field demon puppet made him very terrifying. At this time, Qiao Shui didn't have the blessing of slaughter power, so she was no match for Gui Shiming at all. Gui Shiming and Gui Bao worked together to force Qiao Shui, Yi Wenmao, and Long Yeli back, and once again slashed at Mu Yu. It was too late for Qiao Shui to stop at this time. Gui Shiming's speed was too fast. The ghost fog instantly enveloped Mu Yu's entire body. Xiao Shui shouted and rushed over, wanting to block Gui Shiming, but Gui Shiming swept heavily. The ghost aura turned into a big hand and smashed Xiao Shui away. This time, let's see who will save you. Gui Shiming showed a vicious smile, and the blood-colored long axe appeared in the air and slashed down. But a hand suddenly grabbed Gui Shiming's blood-colored long axe directly, so that the bloody axe couldn't move forward anymore. Gui Shiming, it's time to settle the score between us. Mu Yu's eyes flashed with two lights, one black and one white. The murderous aura swept out again, shattering the billowing ghost aura and blasted at Gui Shiming. The black and white Mu Ling appeared in the air, and the strong murderous intent had already locked onto Gui Shiming. This time, Mu Yu wanted to completely destroy Gui Shiming. Gui Shiming angrily roared. He condensed a ghost hand to block Mu Yu's aura, but that aura was like an unstoppable force. It tyrannically penetrated the ghost hand and swept towards Gui Shiming's head. Pa! Gui Shiming felt as if his head was hit by a mountain. His whole head was stunned for a moment, and at the same time, his head was uncontrollably sent flying and crashed on the demon island, creating a 100-meter wide crater on the ground. How is that possible? Gui Shiming was furious. His voice trembled as he recalled that even Gui Yeming, who was at the crossing calamity stage, had been killed by Mu Yu. Even if he had fused with the Blood Realm devil puppet, he was still far from being a match for Mu Yu. Ghosts cherish their lives. Your life is about to come to an end. Mu Yu held Helion Kong's soul tool in his hand. Powerful soul force was continuously channeled into his body. At the same time, the Yarrow ceiling pagoda also flickered with light from time to time, making his aura even stronger. The black and white auras intertwined in the air, turning into two sharp sword rays. They crisscrossed and slashed towards Gui Shiming. Gui Shiming quickly flew out of the crater. Countless blood mists were stirred up in front of him. He wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape, but these blood mists had already disappeared the moment they were hit by the black and white sword rays. There was no room for resistance at all. Boom! The black and white sword rays once again slashed on Gui Shiming's head. A crack actually appeared on Gui Shiming's head. The appearance of this crack also completely destroyed the last of Gui Shiming's confidence. One had to know that the Blood Realm Devil Puppet was an extremely vicious thing in the Gate of Hell. It only had a lifespan of 7 days, but it was extremely powerful. It was an indestructible existence. At that time, Xiao Shuai's sharp claws split open Gui Shiming's head, but Gui Shiming fused back together without leaving a single scar. But this time, the crack that appeared on Gui Shiming's head was actually unable to heal. There has never been an absolute defense in this world. Mu Yu coldly shouted, and the black and white sword light once again chopped on Gui Xiaming's head, and this time Gui Xiaming didn't even have the chance to fight back, and a crack appeared on his head again. Within the crack, there was a faint manic black sword aura and a surging white sword aura. They constantly invaded the entire bone, preventing the Blood Realm Devil Puppet from healing. How can you invade my head? Impossible. Impossible. The Blood Realm Devil Puppet cannot be defeated. Gui Shiming roared crazily. He formed a ghost hand and wanted to force the black and white sword rays out. However, the two sword rays had already hidden themselves in his head. They rampaged and smashed the brain and blood inside. Gui Shiming wailed in pain. He let out a heart-wrenching roar. He felt that his entire head was about to explode. A pain that was worse than death appeared on his head. Hiss. Originally, after Gui Shiming merged with the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, his entire head was only left with bloody blood vessels. There was not a single piece of intact skin. At this time, the black and white sword rays invaded his head. The black and white sword aura kept bursting out from the blood vessels on his head. I am not reconciled. Ah! Gui Shiming let out a final scream. His eyes suddenly emitted black and white sword aura. Not only that, his 7 orifices were already filled with powerful sword aura. His brain matter was like a fountain. Even his mouth was filled with sword aura. He could no longer make a sound. The biting cold black and white sword aura swept across Gui Shiming's face. It took away all his flesh and blood. His soul contained in the Blood Realm Devil Puppet was also crushed by the black and white sword aura. A moment later, his entire head had completely turned into a cracked black skull. In the end, Gui Shiming died under Mu Yu's sword aura. The Blood Realm Devil Puppet had incomparably powerful defensive ability. However, the slaughter power in Mu Yu's hand was filled with awe-inspiring killing intent. It invaded Gui Shiming's head and completely destroyed him. After losing Gui Shiming as its host, the Blood Realm Devil Puppet rolled on the ground and became ordinary. It looked like a black skull without the slightest bit of flesh. There were also shocking cracks on it. It could be blown into a pile of bone fragments by the wind at any time. The slaughter power was still swaying in the air and spread all over Mu Yu's body. Mu Yu coldly glanced at Ghost Leopard, causing him to feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Even Gui Shiming and Gui Yiming had died, so Ghost Leopard was definitely not Mu Yu's opponent. You should also accompany Gui Shiming and Gui Shiming. Mu Yu's voice was like the king of hell, pronouncing Gui Shiming's death. Gui Shiming did not hesitate to turn around and run away from the demon island. But when he ran to the seaside, he was horrified to realize that he could not leave the demon island. Although the subduing demon pagoda was damaged, the powerful imprisoning power still spread all over the demon island. Gui Shiming did not have the Blood Realm Devil soul like Gui Shiming. He could not get out. At this time, Mu Yu's black and white sword aura descended like a death god. It directly poured into Gui Shiming's body from the top of his head, destroying his life force in an instant. It was too late for his soul to escape. Bang! Ghost Leopard's body fell straight to the ground. The moment it fell to the ground, it had already broken into pieces like a clay figurine. All of the spiritual power in its body had disappeared as if it had been forcefully sucked dry by something. The sea breeze slightly blew Gui Shiming's body into a pile of powder and turned into yellow soil. But the slaughter did not stop. Mu Yu's heart was incomparably calm. He had his own consciousness and knew what he was doing. But the desire to slaughter in his heart was still not quelled. At this moment, he seemed to have no friend or foe, only slaughter. He turned his gaze to Qiao Shui and the others. He knew that Qiao Shui was with him, so he forcibly restrained the urge to kill Qiao Shui. Instead, he stared at Long Yeli and Yi Wenmao. Long Yeli and Yi Wenmaro had helped Long Xingyun to frame him. This time, he did not intend to let these two people go. The black and white sword aura intertwined in the air and fell toward Long Yeli and Yi Wenmaro. Long Yeli and Yi Wenmao's faces changed drastically. They were almost scared out of their wits. Mu Yu, who had the power of slaughter, looked like a killing god. He was so powerful that they could not have any desire to live. They could only wait for death. However, little Shuai had already jumped back at this time. He knew that Mu Yu had fallen into that power. Even if he did not lose consciousness, it caused him to become very bloodthirsty. The longer he fell into this power, the worse it would be for Mu Yu. Mu Yu, withdraw that power. Can you hear what I'm saying? You can't be controlled by the power of slaughter now. Otherwise, you will become emotionless in the future. Have you forgotten that you still have to resurrect Deadwood Daddy? Little Shuai shouted in a childish voice. At the same time, the shadow clone sword flew out from nowhere and instantly met the two black and white sword auras in the air. Deadwood Daddy, Mu Yu's heart was touched. He remembered everything very clearly. His feelings for Deadwood Daddy were also vivid in his mind. He also remembered what the power of slaughter represented. Crack the ninth heaven sealing demon formation, merge with Gomang, and lead the entire human. However, he could not choose to accept this power of slaughter now. The ninth heaven sealing demon formation in Mu Yu's body seemed to be flashing faintly, transforming into an uncontrollable state. The ninth heaven sealing demon formation was originally engraved in his soul. Mu Yu had never sensed the formation's existence. However, the murderous aura allowed him to sense the ninth heaven sealing demon formation's existence. The runes of the ninth heaven sealing demon formation also began to tremble, and those runes seemed to be annihilating. Little Shuai, seal this power. Mu Yu's voice was very calm. He knew what he had to do. The shadow clone sword had already swallowed the two white sword auras and fell into Mu Yu's hand. Mu Ling gradually left Mu Yu's hand and floated in the air. The shadow clone sword trembled, and a gentle aura instantly isolated the cold power of slaughter from Mu Yu's body. The power of slaughter is too terrifying. Mu Yu finally recovered his emotions. Although the power of slaughter was strong, it also suppressed all of his emotions. If a person had no emotions and was only left with slaughter, then they would undoubtedly be a tool. He gently shook his head. Even though he had the cultivation of the body integration stage, there was still a trace of murderous aura in his body that was difficult to erase. Mu Ling, who was beside him, seemed to have a pulse. Mu Yu could still feel the murderous aura on Mu Ling's body. It's still too much for you to use this power now. Little Shuai sealed Mu Ling back into the shadow clone sword, isolating it from Mu Yu. Only in this way could Mu Yu not be affected by Mu Ling's slaughter. When using the power of slaughter, Mu Yu actually enjoyed the pleasure of slaughter. However, Mu Yu had to force himself to hate it because he knew very well that once he completely accepted this power, he would no longer be himself. Is there anything wrong with the ninth heaven sealing demon formation in your body? Little Shuai asked hesitantly. Chapter 732. Mu Yu shook his head. I haven't broken the balance yet, but if I use it a few more times, I'm afraid the balance of the 5 elements will be broken. Breaking the balance of the 5 elements was something that Mu Yu had been working hard on for the past few years. But now that he had experienced the horror of the killing power, he was no longer in a hurry. That was because killing suppressed his emotions. He was worried that if he lost himself in the killing, he would forget his original intention of reviving Deadwood's father. Xiao Shui landed beside Mu Yu and asked with concern, Mu Yu, are you okay? I'm fine, but you, when I was unconscious, you were accidentally affected by my slaughter energy. Mu Yu didn't remember this matter very clearly, but when Mu Ling and Shui Ling came in contact, their minds would become connected, so Mu Yu vaguely knew what happened. Xiao Shui nodded, a complicated look on her face. I don't like that kind of power. That power was really terrifying, and Xiao Shui still had some lingering fear when thinking about it. Mu Yu nodded. In the future, Shui Ling and Mu Ling can't come in contact with each other casually. My slaughter energy can only stay awake when I use it. You won't be able to stay awake when you use it. You may need this power in the future, which means... Xiao Shui nodded. I know, it means I also need to obtain this power, right? Mu Yu was silent. Before coming to the Demon Beast Island, Old Treehead had already explained the situation to him. If they wanted to lead Yuman, they must first obtain Yuman's approval, and the most important thing was to obtain their own slaughter energy. Now, Mu Yu had obtained his own slaughter energy by devouring countless flesh-winged horned monsters, but Xiao Shui hadn't. If the three heavy palaces instigated Yuman to go to war with the human race in the future, the five of them would decide the direction of the war. Don't be too depressed, the boat will cross the bridge when it comes to it, Xiao Shui said indifferently. Now we have to think of a way to help Boss Lu. As Mu Yu spoke, he turned his attention to Boss Lu, who was still restraining Gui Yezi. Boss Lu's demonic arts had already weakened him greatly. He seemed to be using his own life to help Sea Goblin King escape. How can we help him? Xiao Shui asked anxiously. Mu Yu observed Boss Lu's situation. At this time, Boss Lu was protected by the formations so close, yet worlds apart. But in fact, it was not necessary, because at this time, except for Gui Yezi, the rest of the people from the Gate of Hell had been killed by Mu Yu. He doesn't need our help. It seems like the Sea Demon King is about to struggle free, Mu Yu said in surprise. At this moment, Gui Yezi suddenly let out another wild roar, as if he could no longer suppress the Sea Goblin King's resistance within his body. The entire black fog suddenly exploded, revealing Gui Yezi's body. After Boss Lu's blood passed through the totem, it emitted a dazzling bloody light, gradually awakening the Sea Goblin King. After all, Sea Goblin King was once a figure on par with Master Shen Jizi. Even if Gui Yezi relied on the Blood Realm Devil Puppet and Blood Realm Devil Soul to control him, at this time, there was a backlash. Boss Lu's demonic arts were taught by White Ape Demon King, and the demonic arts between demonic kings were much more powerful than those of the Gate of Hell. Gui Yezi roared angrily. The flesh on his body had already split open, turning into ghost fog and peeling off. His body gradually withered, revealing the skeleton of Sea Goblin King. Coveting my body, you people from the Gate of Hell are really black sheep, Sea Goblin King's voice echoed above the Demon Island, letting Mu Yu and the others breathe a sigh of relief. Gui Yezi was still unwilling to give up, and was still desperately fighting for control of the body. But Sea Goblin King had already seized the initiative, and a powerful demonic energy burst forth from his body, scattering all of the ghost fog. Damn it! Gui Yezi's soul had already jumped out of Sea Goblin King's body, and landed in the sky above the Demon Island. His expression was gloomy, and he angrily glared at Sea Goblin King. Sea Goblin King, I didn't expect you to still have a trick up your sleeve. Gui Yezi's voice was incomparably resentful. He had been planning for so long, but at the last moment, there was still a mistake, and everything had been for nothing. Are you still not going to surrender? Sea Goblin King's skeleton slowly walked towards Boss Lu, and with every step he took, the entire Demon Island would tremble, as if to welcome the return of their king, and the aura of the entire Demon Island began to become more and more restless. Surrender without a fight. You think you've won? Gui Yezi sneered, and suddenly reached out with his hand, and the cracked Blood Realm Devil Puppet on the ground was caught in his hand. Although Gui Xiaoming was no longer attached to the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, the power of the Blood Realm Devil Puppet seemed to have not dissipated. Gui Yezi's soul was black, and filled with a strange and eerie aura. After the Blood Realm Devil Puppet touched Gui Yezi, it suddenly emitted a dark light, and Gui Yezi and the Blood Realm Devil Puppet fused together. Unlike Gui Xiaoming, after Gui Yezi and the Blood Realm Devil Puppet fused together, Gui Yezi's aura was even more terrifying than Gui Xiaoming's. This was not only because Gui Yezi had the strength of a crossing tribulation stage expert, but more importantly, Gui Yezi had become the host of the Blood Realm Devil Soul. The combination of the Blood Realm Devil Soul and the Blood Realm Devil Puppet far exceeded Gui Xiaoming's strength. At this time, Gui Yezi still only had one head, but he smiled eerily and rushed into the sky. The domain of the suppressing demon pagoda could not trap him. He stretched out his hand, and suddenly, a red figure floated over from the distant sea. It was another person from the Gate of Hell. Gui Yezi did not choose to let everyone onto the demon island, but left some people outside to wait for orders, and to guard the people who were originally going to be sacrificed to the flesh-winged horned monster. This person from the Gate of Hell's cultivation was at the severed soul stage. When he was caught by Gui Yezi, he looked a little flustered and did not understand what was going on. "You are Master Gui Yezi?" After the captured person from the Gate of Hell saw the person who caught him, he thought of the purpose of his trip and was not surprised. He glanced at the situation of the demon island below and did not see any of his companions from the Gate of Hell, which made him a little surprised. Gui Yezi sneered, "It seems that you have to make a sacrifice." Gui Yezi quickly jumped into the air, and the blood mist on his body suddenly rolled out. Gui Yezi controlled the Blood Realm Devil Soul, and after fusing with the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, his body became very strange. The captured person from the Gate of Hell did not have time to ask what this meant, and the blood mist spread out from Gui Yezi's body and suddenly enveloped him. "Ah!" The person from the Gate of Hell let out a scream, and then no longer made a sound. His body's cultivation was constantly rising, and at the same time, his appearance changed, and he became Gui Yezi's appearance. Gui Yezi's cultivation had reached the peak of the crossing calamity stage, and his appearance caused the weather to change dramatically again. Ghost Chi was dense, and countless resentful spirits were constantly howling and shouting, eyeing the people on the demon island covetously. The skeleton of the Siren King stopped beside Boss Lu. Boss Lu's aura was very weak at the moment, but his face was quite respectful. He knew his mission, and now only the blood in his body could revive the Siren King and defeat Gui Yezi. "Master Siren King, you can start to strip the blood from my body," Boss Lu said with a face full of determination. The Siren King patted Boss Lu's shoulder and said with a dignified expression, "It's been hard on you. Even if it means death." Boss Lu did not shrink back. Even if he knew that after his blood was drained, death would be waiting for him, but he was willing to give up his life for the great cause of the demon race's revitalization. Mu Yu frowned and looked at all this without saying anything. Blood was already flowing out from Boss Lu's wrist, and as if it was summoned, it was like a nimble line of blood in the air, wrapping around the skeleton of the Siren King. At the same time, Xiao Shue's seawater also merged into the Siren King's body along with the blood. The blood in the Siren King's body began to flow regularly, gradually forming blood vessels, and the seawater wrapped around the blood vessels like a skin, making the Siren King's entire skeleton gradually fill out. As the Siren King's body was reconstructed, his aura also rose higher and higher. A majestic aura reverberated over the entire demon island, gradually competing with Gui Yezi's aura, and even faintly surpassing Gui Yezi's. Boss Lu's face was already pale, and his skin had already dried up. His entire body became weak and feeble. But his eyes revealed a gratified expression, and he did not regret being a sacrifice for the resurrection of the Siren King. But at this moment, a green light flashed, cutting off the connection between the Siren King and Boss Lu. Mu Yu held the shadow clone sword and stood beside Boss Lu, frowning as he said, "Don't go too far, this bit of blood should be enough." "Little friend Mu Yu, this is of my own volition, please." Boss Lu was dispirited, but he still spoke urgently. "Today's killing is enough." Mu Yu calmly looked at the Siren King, who had turned seawater into skin. Whether it was the style of the demon race or the people of the Gate of Hell, he did not like it. That kind of sacrificial method made him uncomfortable, and Boss Lu was a loyal person, and Mu Yu did not want to see him die like this. "Little friend Mu Yu, it doesn't matter if I die, but only if the Siren King absorbs enough blood can he recover." Boss Lu lightly waved his wrist, wanting to draw out the little blood left in his body. "Hey, I haven't allowed you to die yet." Dragon Vine stretched out its tail from Mu Yu's shoulder and patted Boss Lu's face. Boss Lu's face was full of respect. "Lord True Dragon, this bit of blood is indeed enough." The Siren King had already turned into an elegant middle-aged man, and seawater revolved around his body, forming a blue robe that covered his body. He looked at Mu Yu face to face, and wanted to see something from Mu Yu's eyes, but Mu Yu's eyes were clear and calm, without any ripples. "It is rare for a human race to have someone like you," the Siren King praised. "I hope that the one I saved is not an evil Siren King." Mu Yu put away the shadow clone sword and sat cross-legged once again, starting to adjust his breathing. The Siren King remained silent for a while, and then revealed a cultured and elegant smile. "Don't worry. I am a scholar, and I teach my people to learn about the sea at any time, so that they can live a better life." Mu Yu's heart skipped a beat. The Siren King gave him the feeling of a scholar who had the image of an emperor. When the Siren King had just escaped from Zdui's Nirvana formation technique, the Siren King had spoken very politely, and when he had been stopped by Seahorse Dowdow on the Holy Road, Seahorse Dowdow had also said that the Siren King required every clansman to learn about the sea, so that they could live a better life. The Siren King had overturned Mu Yu's view of Siren Kings. He had always thought that Siren Kings were tyrannical and unreasonable beings like the white ape, but now it seemed that the white ape's preconceived image had caused Mu Yu to misunderstand. "However, I will not be merciful when killing an intruder." The Siren King's voice became serious, and the white sea calming thousand ruler appeared in his hand. This magic treasure had been left behind by the Siren King when Gui Yezi left his body. His gaze darkened, and a tyrannical aura soared into the sky, causing the whole island to shake violently. Then he disappeared from where he was, and took a step forward, standing in the sky, and coldly glancing at Gui Yezi in the sky. Chapter 733. The Sea Goblin King's aura seemed to be connected with the whole island. There seemed to be something moving rhythmically on the island. The ground also emitted a blue brilliance that merged with the Sea Goblin King's body. The suppressing demon pagoda's domain seemed to be attacked by some mysterious power. It became unstable and was about to break free. "Little friend Mu Yu, you already control the suppressing demon pagoda, right?" The Sea Goblin King turned his head and asked. "Yes," Mu Yu replied. The Sea Goblin King's sea-calming thousand ruler flickered with blue brilliance. He pointed it at Gui Yezi and said, "Then release the demon island's shackles. Otherwise, with my power, I will destroy this magic treasure." Although the Sea Goblin King was trapped by this magic treasure for several thousand years, he didn't think of destroying it. He just asked Mu Yu to put it away. This surprised Mu Yu. Normally, if someone was trapped by something for several thousand years, the first thing they would do after coming back would be to destroy it. Mu Yu's mind moved. The suppressing demon pagoda's domain power was already very weak. It couldn't help at all. He controlled the suppressing demon pagoda's domain power. With just a thought, the suppressing demon pagoda's restriction on the demon island was completely removed. It was no longer suppressing the whole island. "Now it's our turn to settle accounts, Gui Yezi." The Sea Goblin King's expression was solemn. He stood there, and his every movement was filled with the demeanor of a king. The whole demon island began to tremble. Resuscitation was like the resuscitation of a dormant beast. Some deep pits began to appear on the ground. Waves of aura that made people's heart palpitate spread from the deep pits. Crash! A large amount of seawater suddenly shot out from the deep pit of the demon island, and every rock on the island began to flip, as if something was trying to crawl out from the ground. Then, the rocks kept rolling and were washed into the air by the seawater. 81 rocks were arranged in an orderly manner in the air every few tens of meters. Every rock was connected by a thin line of seawater. These rocks looked ordinary, and they were covered with coral reefs and seaweed. The 81 huge rocks were like a cage, trapping Gui Yezi inside. "Do you think you can trap me with just a few pieces of trash? Too naive." Gui Yezi shouted coldly. His body turned into a crimson shadow as he rushed towards the cracks in the rocks. He wanted to escape the encirclement of the 81 rocks, but the seemingly thin lines of seawater formed a blue barrier that blocked Gui Yezi's path. "What?" Gui Yezi was furious. The Blood Realm Devil Souls and Blood Realm Devil Puppets were evil things that even Daoist Master Shen Jiz's domain couldn't do anything to, but they were trapped by these seemingly ordinary 81 stone. Everything has its weakness. Don't you understand this principle? This is my territory, not a place where you can behave atrociously. The sea-calming thousand ruler left the Sea Demon King's hand, and it quickly became bigger in the air. Soon after, a several hundred-meter-tall wave was raised outside the demon island, and it covered the sky. Every wave was revolving, and it turned into many waterspouts, and it surged violently with the sea calming thousand ruler as its center. Guiyez's face had become extremely gloomy. These monstrous waves were a huge threat to him, and he knew that it would be very difficult for him to get anything out of this trip. Soul Puppet Descend. Guiyezi had planned many things for this day, but his plan was ruined step by step. Even so, he still had two trump cards in his hands, the Blood Realm Devil Puppets and the Blood Realm Devil Souls. A huge skeleton emerged from the blood mist that filled the sky. This skeleton was over 100 meters long. The bones of its entire body were not purely in the shape of a human. Instead, they were formed from the bones of various demon beasts. There were sharp bone spikes everywhere, and a huge bone claw swung down with a gust of wind. When the skeletons descended, the entire sky was covered by a layer of gloomy ghost fog. The sky was dark, as if it was about to collapse. All kinds of blood souls floated around the skeletons, drilling in and out of the gaps of the skeletons. Sea Demon King, your body is mine, Guiyezi roared. The skeleton in the air stretched out its fist, and with a punch, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Black cracks appeared in the air, as if it couldn't bear such a huge power. The waves were surging violently under the fist's wind, and the demon island seemed to be in imminent danger. It could be smashed to pieces by this punch at any time. You want my body? You're not enough. Sea Demon King stood in the sky above the demon island, and the demon island emitted an incomparably powerful blue light, forming a shield that tightly protected the demon island. Obviously, Sea Demon King didn't want the battle between him and Guiyezi to affect the people on the demon island. Otherwise, if the two of them went all out, everyone on the demon island would be in danger. My lord rises and falls. The power of the domain instantly covered Guiyez's body, and it also affected everyone. Everyone felt as if their bodies had become weightless. They were like a lonely and helpless boat, drifting along the surging waves, completely unable to control the direction of their movements. In this domain, they couldn't even control their own bodies, so how could they fight with the other party? Mu Yu was surprised to feel the power of the domain around him. Just like what he saw in the image left by Daoist Master Shen Jizi, the Sea Demon King's domain could restrict people's movements. In this domain, it seemed that everything was up to fate, and there was no autonomy. The huge skeleton summoned by Guiyezi punched out in the air, and when the fist smashed down, countless bone spurs turned into a dense number of sharp cones, and entered the Sea Demon King's domain. However, Guiyezi still miscalculated. The Sea Demon King's domain ability was far beyond his imagination. When Boss Lu returned the blood in his body to Sea Demon King had already recovered most of his strength. This strength had already reached the heaven-defying great vehicle stage, and it was still stronger than Guiyezi. The Soul Puppet's fist hit the Sea Demon King's domain, but it was like hitting cotton, and everything seemed soft and powerless. Wherever the fist went, countless waves appeared out of nowhere in the air. These splashing waves wrapped around the Soul Puppet skeleton, and the seawater was like ropes that wrapped around the Soul Puppet skeleton, removing all of the force. Those bone spurs that turned into sharp cones in the air seemed to have encountered a huge transparent water screen, and all of the sharp cones became extremely slow. The waves rolled, and all of the sharp cones were scattered, and they were dragged to the bottom of the sea, disappearing without a trace. Damn it! Guiyezi roared in shock and anger, and wanted to control the Soul Puppet skeleton to leave the Sea Demon King's domain. However, the Sea Demon King's anger had already been mixed in with the waves that filled the sky. The waves that were a few hundred meters tall suddenly rose to a few thousand meters or tens of thousands of meters, and they had the power to destroy heaven and earth, and they crashed down on the Soul Puppet skeleton from all directions. In an instant, the sky darkened, and the sky collapsed. It was as if the end of the world had arrived, and it could destroy everything in the world. The seemingly huge Soul Puppet skeleton looked so small in front of this terrifying water screen. It stood there, and it had already lost its sense of propriety, and it didn't know where to escape to, because the waves had already blocked all of its escape route. Boom! 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 A deafening sound reverberated through the clouds, and the entire sea seemed to have experienced a catastrophe. All of the seawater seemed to have been swept up into the sky, and then returned to the sea, and even the ground shook violently without end. Even though the demon island was protected by a mysterious blue radiance, the ground was still forcibly torn in two by this extremely shocking earthquake, and it extended from one end of the island to the other, dividing the entire island into two. What a terrifying power! Mu Yu was extremely shocked in his heart. Just now, the Sea Demon King seemed to have lifted up the entire sea's seawater, and then poured it down. That kind of world-shaking power smashed down, and even a 1,000-meter-tall mountain would be smashed into pieces, let alone the soul puppet skeleton. Lord Sea Demon King's ability to control water is too powerful. Xiao Shui was extremely shocked. Although she could control water, her ability to control water seemed so weak in front of the Sea Demon King. With her current cultivation, it was impossible for her to control such a vast amount of seawater. Gui Yezi was also intimidated by the Sea Demon King's monstrous waves, and he forcibly resisted this terrifying torrential downpour of seawater, but at this moment, shocking cracks appeared all over his body, and then with a crash, the body he seized from his own people also turned into ashes, leaving behind only the already destroyed skull. Never have any ideas about my dynasty. Sea Demon King lightly shouted, and all kinds of tentacles suddenly extended from the waterspout. These tentacles were completely made of seawater, and they swept towards Gui Yezi from different directions. Gui Yezi's body spread out a powerful ghost fog, and he wanted to resist these tentacles' attack. But the tentacles seemed to have entered into no man's land, and penetrated the ghost fog, and all of them pierced into Gui Yezi's head. I am not reconciled. Gui Yezi looked up to the sky and roared, but the seawater had already poured into his head through the cracks on his skull, and then his eyeballs were flushed out by the seawater in his head, and the seawater turned into water pillars that shot out from his 7 orifices. Bang! Gui Yezi left behind an unwilling scream in the air, and his head directly exploded, and countless souls burst out from his body. These souls were the souls that Gui Yezi collected on the island, and after losing Gui Yezi's suppression, they unexpectedly regained their consciousness. What's going on? It's the Sea Demon King. The Sea Demon King has broken free? These souls in the air looked at the Sea Demon King towering above the waves with bewilderment, and the souls of the devil race were already cheering, and the souls of the human race were silently looking at the Sea Demon King. The Sea Demon King that they had guarded for more than 5,000 years finally broke free from the seal. If you don't have Xian Jiz's cultivation, then don't have any ideas about me. Sea Demon King waved his hand, and all the waves returned to the sea, and the 81 rocks also entered the Demon Island, as if nothing had happened. All the tremors just now didn't affect the living people on the Demon Island, but the Demon Island was already shaken into 2 halves. Sea Demon King put his hands together, and the waves of the sea violently rolled up again, and fiercely collided with the 2 sides of the Demon Island, and the whole Demon Island once again issued a huge tremor, and then the separated Demon Island was once again gathered together by the huge force of the sea. Long live the Sea Demon King! All the devil race people, whether they were souls or living devil race people, loudly cheered, and cheered for their king. Xiao Shui was also cheering, and only Mu Yu was silently looking at all of this, and like those silent souls of the human race, he didn't say anything. These souls that had been trapped for more than 5,000 years had always been guarding this demon island for Daoist Xianjizi, and didn't let the Sea Demon King come into being, but now it seemed that the Sea Demon King's coming into being was a foregone conclusion. We are free. Mu Mengfei was standing among the souls, and she was very conspicuous. She floated to Mu Yu's side, and looked deeply at Mu Yu. Freedom comes at the price of death. Xiao Shui said seriously. That's right. Freedom comes at the price of death. Mu Mengfei laughed, and didn't say anything. Chapter 734. The Sea Fiend King stood there, accepting the worship of all the fiend souls. Only the souls of the human race seemed very disappointed. The Sea Fiend King's escape was a huge blow to them. They had been trapped on the island for 5,000 years, always fighting against the fiend souls. They didn't expect the fiends to win in the end. However, they also understood that if the Sea Fiend King hadn't acted today, all their souls would have become ghost soldiers in the hands of Gui Yezi. At this time, The shackles of the fiend sealing pagoda on the island had been removed. All the souls could leave freely. These souls had been dead for a long time because the power of the domain allowed them to retain their consciousness. However, now that the domain had disappeared, their consciousness could only be maintained for a few more hours. After a few hours, all the souls' consciousness would dissipate. At that time, the souls could no longer be seen, and no one knew where they would go. I can finally be free. Helion Kong floated out of the soul tool. His soul was still very weak. Although he had suffered a lot, he could still wait until the domain was removed, so he wouldn't be trapped on this island forever. Senior, are you okay? Mu Yu looked at Helion Kong, and a warm feeling welled up in his heart. Helion Kong was a senior worthy of his respect. When he first came to the island, if it wasn't for Helion Kong's protection, he probably wouldn't have been able to survive against Gui Yeming. I'm fine. Mu Yu, you were able to destroy the people of the Gate of Hell. You really are the pride of our Pill Cauldron school. Helion Kong patted Mu Yu's shoulder with a smile. Mu Yu felt like his shoulder was hit by a piece of ice, and a bone-chilling cold invaded his body. However, Mu Yu suddenly felt that this greeting was very intimate. Mu Mengfei looked into the distance and revealed a charming smile. She must have been a devastatingly beautiful woman when she was alive. Brother Helion, your wish of so many years has finally come true, hasn't it? Helion Kong smiled and said, yes. I've guarded the island day and night for more than 5,000 years. Being able to leave is also a blessing. Mu Mengfei floated into the air. Brother Helion, I'll be leaving first. Helion Kong nodded. I still have some things to say to Mu Yu. See you later, never. The sea breeze caused Mu Yu's clothes to flutter. Mu Mengfei had already left the demon island. Before her consciousness dissipated, she wanted to get as far away from the demon island as possible. She wanted to leave the demon island where they had been imprisoned for more than 5,000 years. Even if her soul consciousness dissipated, it should happen outside the demon island. Helion Kong looked at Mu Yu with praise. I am very gratified that the Pill Cauldron sect has sent such an outstanding junior. At least it means that the Pill Cauldron sect has not declined. Mu Yu gritted his teeth. The Alchemy Cauldron sect would not decline, but Helion Kong would eventually die. He originally wanted to inscribe a soul anchoring array to protect Helion Kong like how he protected Deadwood Daddy, but the soul anchoring array was too complicated. He had never tried it before, and Mu Yu wasn't confident that he could inscribe it perfectly. He needed a few days to prepare, and Helion Kong's consciousness probably wouldn't last more than a few hours. It's a pity that the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda can't be used. Otherwise, we could have brought you along, Little Shuai said regretfully. The Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda had been severely damaged. After Mu Yu removed its imprisonment on the demon island, the power of the domain gradually disappeared. He also couldn't use the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda to protect Helion Kong's soul. The Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda was repairing itself and wouldn't leave the demon island. As for how long it would take, Mu Yu didn't know because the pagoda spirit had already floated out of his body and entered the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda. The pagoda spirit also cut off its connection with Mu Yu. At this time, the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal appeared in Mu Yu's hand. This was the key to opening the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda. After the pagoda spirit gave it to Mu Yu, the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda fell into a deathly silence. The Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal needed the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda's powerful spiritual power as a foundation to return to the past. After leaving the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda, there wouldn't be enough power to support Mu Yu to return to the past. This power needed to be at least at the Great Ascension stage. Senior, can a soul tool protect your soul? Mu Yu asked seriously. After a soul died, their consciousness wouldn't be retained for too long. Helion Kong and the others were able to retain their consciousness because of the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda's all laws return to origin domain. But now that the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda's domain had disappeared, it meant that the consciousness of these souls would soon dissipate. Helion Kong shook his head. A soul tool doesn't have that ability. Now that you've destroyed the conspiracy of the Gate of Hell and the souls on the Demon Island have obtained freedom, it's time for me to leave. Then what can I do for you? Mu Yu looked at Helion Kong. Ever since he came to the Demon Island, Hellion Kong had been helping him and helping him avoid being framed by the people of the Gate of Hell. But in the end, Gui Yeming bore a grudge against him and was tortured by the people of the Gate of Hell. Mu Yu still felt a trace of guilt towards Hellion Kong. He really wanted to do something for Hellion Kong. Back then, I took in a disciple. He was an orphan named Hellion Tai. Although he's long gone, if you can see his descendants when you return to the Pill Cauldron sect, please take care of them. Hellion Kong thought of his disciple and smiled. When I left, he was the same age as you. It's just that his talent wasn't as high as yours. I will, senior. Mu Yu's expression dimmed. Mu Yu wasn't very familiar with the Pill Cauldron sect. He hadn't stayed there for long. If it wasn't for Deadwood Daddy, he wouldn't even have any relationship with the Pill Cauldron sect. However, Mu Yu didn't tell Hellion Kong this. Since this was Hellion Kong's request, Mu Yu would naturally pay attention to it. The restriction has been lifted. The people of the Gate of Hell are dead. You seem to have some relationship with the demon race. I don't need to worry about your safety. This matter is over. You don't need to worry about anything. Hellion Kong smiled. Then where will you go? Mu Yu asked. Where would the soul return to? Xian Jizi said that the three-layered palace was located at the intersection of reincarnation and arranged for the soul's reincarnation. However, Mu Yu also understood that the three-layered palace would use the soul power of every soul that entered reincarnation to maintain their strength. Hellion Kong would eventually become the power of the three-layered palace. Hellion Kong looked at the sea with satisfaction. I don't know where to go. What I want to do the most is to go back to the Pill Cauldron sect and see how the cultivation world has developed. However, I know that I can't float to the mainland, so I'll go wherever I can. At least I can leave this cage-like demon island and feel the embrace of freedom. Even if I die, I will have no regret. They had been trapped on a demon island for 5,000 years, unable to cultivate, unable to see living people, and not knowing what had happened in the cultivation world. In order to pass the time, they had chosen to compete with the demon race for territory. Over time, they had long been tired of this kind of life. Every quarter of an hour on the demon island was like suffering. He had always yearned for freedom, even if it was short-lived. Even if I die, I will have no regrets. Mu Yu didn't like death, but he now had the power to kill. Wherever there was killing, there was death. He had a special view of death. Other than those with the eternal physique, everyone would die, but everyone's attitude towards death was different. Yes, I've already died once. Death is not scary to me. Hellion Kong's expression was calm, without any worry. For example, Long Xingyun was willing to betray his own race in order to survive. Like most people, he was afraid of death. However, Hellion Kong was different. He had once died for the human race, and now he was dying for freedom. Mu Yu met many people who were not afraid of death. For example, they treated Mu Yu as their own child. They used their blood to protect Mu Yu and didn't let Mu Yu revive their Deadwood Daddy. In order to protect the entire cultivation world, they chose to sacrifice their own master, Jianying Chen Feng. In order to revive the Sea Demon King, they were willing to sacrifice themselves. In order to pursue freedom, Hellion Kong chose freedom. They all chose death for a certain belief. In the eyes of some people, death was not scary at all. Mu Yu didn't know how to look at death. This was a process that everyone had to go through. However, some people were forced to die, some people chose to die early, and some people died for freedom. However, Mu Yu rejected death. It wasn't that he was afraid of death, but that he didn't like to see others die in front of him. The death of others would bring him a sense of despair. It was like a life full of vitality coming to an abrupt end, catching him off guard. What does death really mean? After being possessed by the power to kill, he was puzzled by the word death. Spirit Lord Mu Yu possessed a very heaven-defying domain, which was the ability that Mu Yu had always wanted to regain. Life and death in the blink of an eye. Life and death were only in the blink of an eye. Death seemed to have become so simple. Death might be another adventure, right? Hellion Kong explained with a smile. Mu Yu was silent. Hellion Kong regarded death very lightly, but he felt sorry for Helion Kong. I can feel the power to kill that you used. You have to be more careful in the future. You are a member of my alchemy sect. I hope you can live safe and sound for yourself and for those who care about you, Helion Kong said seriously. I understand, Senior. Mu Yu felt very uncomfortable in his heart. When the power to kill wandered in Mu Yu's body, he longed to kill and control the lives of others. On one hand, he liked the power to kill, but on the other hand, he rejected the feeling of death. This made him feel very conflicted. How should he balance the relationship between the two? Mu Yu, I'll leave my soul tool to you for safekeeping. Bring it back to the alchemy sect and bury it in the alchemy sect's mausoleum. It can be considered as returning to my homeland. I want to take advantage of the fact that I'm still conscious to see the scene outside the Demon Island, Helion Kong said. Mu Yu had already engraved a formation that could preserve images on the soul tool and imprinted Helion Kong's image on it. Only in this way could he prove Helion Kong's identity. After a long time, Mu Yu said again, I'm sorry, Senior. I can't protect your soul. He tried his best. Deadwood Daddy's soul anchoring formation could only hold one soul and couldn't protect Helion Kong. Helion Kong patted Mu Yu's shoulder and said with a gratified smile, it's okay. I'm already indifferent to life and death. Being able to enjoy a moment of freedom is enough. Mu Yu was very disappointed. He hoped that he could help Helion Kong return to the third continent to take a look at the cultivation world. He wanted to see how the cultivation world had changed. However, Mu Yu was unable to do so. The sea breeze became stronger and stronger. Mu Yu's hair fluttered in the wind. Helion Kong had already flown towards the sea. After the battle, the sky was cloudless and blue. The sun shone pleasantly on the sea, making the surface of the sea sparkle. Helion Kong's figure gradually disappeared at the end of the sea. He calmly pursued that brief moment of freedom before death. His white body appeared so holy under the sun. He opened his arms, wanting to embrace the entire real world one last time before his consciousness dissipated. He also wanted to embrace freedom. The sun just happened to shine on Helion Kong's soul. Specks of starlight rose from the sea in the distance, gradually blurring Helion Kong's soul, as if it had melted into the sun. It was a sad scene, solemn and stirring, yet beautiful. Chapter 735. Only the Goblin clansman and Mu Yu were left on the Demon Island. The souls of the humans had already left, while the Goblin clansman's souls also gradually dissipated on the Demon Island. Little friend Mu Yu, there is a matter that I must discuss with you. The Sea Demon King walked over and spoke in a friendly tone. He was like an amiable uncle. Even though he was a demon king with great power and could change the color of the sea with a raise of his hand, he didn't put on airs as a demon king to make people have a good impression of him. What is it? Mu Yu didn't dislike the Sea Demon King. At least, the Sea Demon King was a normal demon king compared to the White Ape Demon King, who always shamelessly wanted to be his father-in-law and disliked him. I need to bring the dragon vine with you back to the Azure Dragon dynasty, the Sea Demon King said. Mu Yu furrowed his brows slightly. I won't go, the dragon vine replied straightforwardly. You are a true dragon, and you only have such a little cultivation. You don't have any ability to protect yourself in the outside world. Only my big brother Azure Dragon can help you. The Sea Demon King wasn't annoyed by the dragon vine's cold attitude, and he still spoke warmly. I have lived for several years without any ability to protect myself. I don't want to go to a place full of mixed-blood dragons, the dragon vine said proudly. The Azure Dragon dynasty had already evolved into a place where those with true dragon's bloodline were respected. This meant that the Azure Dragon dynasty was full of mixed-blood dragons. Mu Yu pondered for a moment before he asked the Sea Demon King, will you leave this place? This was the Sea Demon King's dynasty, and it had the Sea Demon King's palace. It was the Sea Demon King's home. Now that the Sea Demon King had escaped, he should establish his own dynasty anew. So, how could the Sea Demon King be willing to leave? The Sea Demon King said with a smile, this place has already changed. Most of the Goblin clansmen in the sea have already disappeared. If I stay here, I'll just be a general without an army. I need to meet the Azure Dragon and understand the cultivation world. I need to discuss the next step. Next step. Are you going to fight over territory with the humans? Muyu asked calmly. Fighting for territory with the human race was a very sensitive topic. Muyu represented the human clan, while the Sea Demon King was the demon clan's leader. However, Muyu unintentionally helped the Sea Demon King once again, and this was why it wasn't wise to discuss this issue at this time. The Sea Demon King sized up Muyu and said thoughtfully, "You are worried about a certain matter, but it doesn't seem like you are worried about fighting over territory with our demon clan. What are you worried about?" Muyu shook his head. "The rise of the demon race has nothing to do with me. I don't care if you want to fight for territory with the human race." However, the Threefold Palace has set some rules for the game. If you want to participate, you have to consider the Threefold Palace. Muyu didn't care about whose territory was bigger or smaller. Right now, he was most concerned about his master's safety. What he regretted the most was that Deadwood Daddy hadn't revived yet. He only wanted to do two things: revive his father and save his master. 3 palaces. As a matter of fact, I didn't look for the Azure Dragon for the Demon Clan's rise, but for the Yu Clan's people. The Sea Demon King stopped smiling, and his expression became solemn. Yu Clan. The Yu Clan's people imprisoned in the demon subduing pagoda are already dead. You don't need to worry about this. Muyu stroked the shadow clone sword in his hand. Mu Ling was hidden in the shadow clone sword, and those loathsome monsters with fleshy wings and horns had already been turned into murderous power, and they became Mu Ling's nourishment. You are wrong. It's precisely because the Yu Clan's people in the demon subduing pagoda are dead that we need to worry, the Sea Demon King said with a grave expression. They are already dead, so what is there to worry about? Muyu asked in confusion. I heard that Jianying Chenfeng is your master, and your master is an extremely powerful person. Didn't he tell you about the Yu Clan's people? The Sea Demon King's scholarly eyes shone with a strange light. He definitely knew far more than Muyu, which made Muyu more and more confused. Just what kind of truth was hidden in the dust of history? Master never mentioned the Yu Clan to me, Muyu replied honestly. His master never mentioned many things to him. He originally thought that Jianying Chenfeng was only the sect master of the Falling Dust sect, and that he could leisurely cultivate in the Falling Dust Mountain, accompanying his master and messing around with his fellow disciples. However, that was far from the truth. A few years ago, Gui Xuanyue's arrival had uncovered his master's dust-covered past, and Muyu had slowly come to understand what kind of person his master was. He was a true god of the 3 continents, an immortal, the person who sealed demon kings, the person who trapped the Yu Clan, and even the person who protected the heavenly birth reincarnation seal, and explained that he was someone who lived in the past. Just what kind of identity did his master have? Then have you not considered one thing? Jianying Chenfeng's abilities were more than enough to kill the Yu Clan, but why didn't he kill them, and instead trapped them in the Yarrow Ceiling Pagoda for so many years? The Sea Demon King knew the truth of the matter. His expression became uncertain, as if he had recalled some past events, which made him frown deeply. Muyu's heart was slightly shaken. He really hadn't considered this question. In the beginning, he only thought that the flesh-winged horned monsters were unkillable, which was why they were imprisoned in Master Xianjiz's treasure. However, now that he thought about it, it was impossible for there to be an unkillable existence in the world. There were always more powerful people hiding in the shadows, and Jianying Chenfeng was one of them. With Jianying Chenfeng's cultivation, it was impossible for him to not be able to kill the Yu Clan. At the very least, he could find something like the mysterious spirit of extreme daylight to kill the Yu Clan. So just what had happened? The Sea Demon King sighed and said, the death of the Yu Clan means that the 3 heavens will be in danger again. These words made Muyu even more confused. The survival of the Yu Clan meant that the 3 heavens would be in danger, so why did the Sea Demon King say that the death of the Yu Clan would put the 3 heavens in danger? Muyu knew that the destruction of the 2 heavens was due to the White Ape Demon King rebelling against the Yu Clan, and offending some powerful existences. However, why did the White Ape Demon King resist? Where did the Yu Clan come from? Why could only sealing the Demon King protect the Demon King? Mu Yu didn't understand the truth of these matters. After remaining silent for a long time, Mu Yu asked, "What kind of existences are the Yu clan?" The Sea Demon King raised his head and looked at the distant sea. His expression suddenly became somewhat desolate and unwilling. He sighed slowly and said, "The Yu clan isn't terrifying. They are only tools on the battlefield. The truly powerful ones are the ones behind them. There are all kinds of rules in this world, and neither you nor I can escape from them. If you want to defy the rules, you will have to pay the price." What rules? Mu Yu still didn't understand. The Sea Demon King's words were too general. The life and death of all living things in the world, as well as the reincarnation cycle, all follow certain rules. The heavenly law is the controller of all living things' rules. When our cultivation reaches the Great Ascension stage, we will comprehend our own domain ability. A domain is a kind of rule. The Great Ascension stage self-cultivators will have a preliminary glimpse of the rules set by the heavenly law. That kind of power will let you understand everything. However, even if I explain it to you now, you won't be able to understand it. The Sea Demon King didn't want to explain too much. He pondered over it repeatedly before continuing. You only need to understand that if someone wants to defy a certain rule, the Yu clan will be dispatched to erase everything. The Yu clan is specially used to carry out the mission of eliminating dissidents. There is no time limit for the mission they carry out. Once all of the Yu clan's members who carry out the mission die, the person behind them will sense it and understand that the mission this time has already failed. They will dispatch even more powerful clans until the mission is completed. Is this the reason why the Yu clan's members were locked up and not killed? Mu Yu was somewhat shocked. He couldn't imagine the mastermind behind the Yu clan's mission to erase the three heavens. Who was it that had the power to destroy a world just like that? That's right, we call the existence behind the Yu clan the Heavens Enforcer. The Yu clan is a slaughtering tool on the battlefield. The Heavens Enforcer will know every time their numbers decrease. When all of the Yu clan's members die, the Heavens Enforcer will understand that it is time to dispatch people to carry out the mission again. The Sea Demon King seemed to be somewhat resentful, but there was nothing he could do. The so-called Heavens Enforcer was too powerful. He wasn't someone he could deal with. Mu Yu's mood suddenly became very heavy, because all of the imprisoned Yu clan's members were swallowed by the aura of death due to his mistake. Didn't that mean that the three heavens were in danger because of him? I'm sorry. The destruction of the Yu clan's members was caused by me. I thought they were wicked beyond redemption and deserved to be destroyed. When Mu Yu killed the flesh-winged horned monsters, he didn't think about this matter at all. At that time, he always thought that the flesh-winged horned monsters couldn't escape from the demon-subduing pagoda. They were wicked beyond redemption and deserved to die. You don't need to blame yourself. This time, the Gate of Hell's people were extremely daring and wanted to control the Yu clan's members. If their plan succeeded and the Yu clan's members broke out of the prison and appeared in the three heavens, then the consequences would be even more severe than now. Your master is a very powerful person. Everything he did at that time was to protect this world. Meanwhile, the Yu clan came to destroy this world. The Sea Demon King didn't feel any sympathy or pity for the death of the flesh-winged horned monsters. On the contrary, he felt that his hatred had been vented. However, the Sea Demon King's words made Mu Yu realize something that didn't make sense. From the Sea Demon King's words, he knew that the Yu clan was much more powerful than human. Since his master's power was enough to capture and imprison the Yu clan's members, then he could completely eliminate human who was much weaker than the Yu clan's members. However, why did he use his own cultivation as the price to set up the immortal imprisoning prison to deal with human? This didn't make sense at all. His master could completely use a magical treasure like the demon-subduing pagoda to imprison human like how he dealt with the Yu clan's members. He didn't need to use a formation like the immortal imprisoning prison that harmed others and himself. The most important thing was that with his power, how could he not detect the ambitions of the Three Heavens White Realm? Or could it be that the immortal imprisoning prison wasn't just used to imprison human and had other goals? Did his master lose his cultivation for other reasons? The Sea Demon King continued, "Your plan to destroy the Gate of Hell's people was correct. At least we have the initiative now. When the Heaven's Enforcers make a comeback, we have time to make preparations." In the past, Jianying Chen Feng relied on powerful methods to deceive everyone and deceive the Heaven's Enforcer's senses. I think that as long as Jianying Chen Feng doesn't die, he can deceive the Heaven's Enforcers for a period of time. Mu Yu clenched his fists tightly. Could his master deceive the Heaven's Enforcers just because he was alive? Chapter 736. Was his master still alive? Mu Yu didn't want to think about it. Xiao Shui patted Mu Yu's shoulder and walked to the Sea Demon King's side. She told him about Jianying and Chen Feng's situation, as well as the threefold palace. The Sea Demon King had been trapped for 5,000 years, and many things had happened. The world of cultivation was no longer the world of cultivation that the Sea Demon King knew. The Sea Demon King's expression became more and more grave, and in the end, he became so gloomy that water could be squeezed out of his face. When he heard that the threefold palaces by Jie had set his sights on Jianying and Chen Feng's immortal body, an angry expression appeared on his elegant face. The threefold palace? He dared to do such a thing. Jianying and Chen Feng sacrificed themselves for the human race, but the threefold palace did such a heinous thing. If anyone knew the truth, they would be furious. This won't do. We must inform the Azure Dragon of this matter as soon as possible. Jianying and Chen Feng must be rescued, or else this world will cease to exist. The Sea Demon King said angrily. Xiao Shui asked, "Lord Demon King, why did Jianying and Chen Feng choose to seal you? Wouldn't you be able to protect the threefold palace better with your existence?" The Sea Demon King sighed. "Jianying and Chen Feng sealed us to protect us. We defied some rules, and the Heaven's Enforcer remembered our auras. Jianying and Chen Feng sealed us and made us fake our deaths to avoid the Heaven's Enforcer's detection. Even though we weren't willing, we couldn't deny that this was the best way. It turned out that this was the truth behind why the Sea Demon King and the others were sealed. Then won't you be detected by the Heaven's Enforcer if you come out now?" The Dragon Vine said in surprise. "You should also know that when I just struggled free from the seal, I wasn't a living person at all. Our auras were obliterated by the seal, and now, it's the same as being reborn. That's why he won't detect it." Every time the Sea Demon King recalled this matter, he would feel helpless. Mu Yu's heart skipped a beat. Every sealed Yarrow King did have some common characteristics. They were either mortals or in a state of suspended animation. The White Ape Demon King didn't have an inner core, and he was trapped near the spiritual energy eye. His spiritual energy was sucked away, and he was no different from a mortal when he broke free from the seal. Demon Monarch Desert Eagle had lost his heart. Only by injecting spiritual energy into his heart could he wake up. Otherwise, he would be a dead man. The Sea Demon King was isolated by a formation spell, and he didn't come in contact with the seawater. The Sea Demon King turned into a skeleton that could be controlled by anyone. From the looks of it, the remaining sealed demon monarchs were probably in a similar state. Then why wasn't the Azure Dragon Monster King sealed? Little Shui asked curiously. It was said that of the 10 great demon kings, only the Azure Dragon Demon King was left. He led the rest of the demon race to live in seclusion. Because Azure Dragon's cultivation is the highest, he can hide his aura. However, this world still needs us monster kings, it needs the Sword Shadow and Dust Wind, or else the world's balance will be broken, the Sea Demon King sighed and said. The Demon King had to be born. So this was what it meant. Mu Yu raised his head and looked at the Sea Demon King. What rules did you defy? The Sea Demon King looked at the sky, and the vast expanse of heaven seemed azure and sacred. White clouds drifted about leisurely, and the sea breeze gusted. Everything seemed so peaceful. However, under the calm, there were endless undercurrents. There was a long silence. Soon after, the Sea Demon King's gaze became resolute, and it seemed like he never regretted this matter. We want to take control of our own destiny. The Sea Demon King's words were sonorous and forceful. The seawater was sparkling, and it seemed so lively and vigorous under the morning sun's illumination. Innumerable sea demon beasts were rolling and jumping in the tide, and they were all cheering with joyful expressions. There were even some demonic beasts' mortal enemies among them, but it seemed like every demonic beast let go of their prejudices, and they didn't push or shove each other. They just revolved around the king in the sea. The sea demon king was born again, and all demonic beasts in the sea cheered excitedly. They were welcoming their leader. "Look, your little Momo is also here," the dragon vine reminded him kindly. Little Shuai hid in Mu Yu's pocket and muttered in a low voice, "He can't see me, he can't see me." However, little Momo let out a shy cry and greeted little Shuai. It was because he smelled little Shuai's aura. Little Shuai wore a bitter expression. It was fortunate that the sea demon king was here, and this was why little Momo just kept chasing after little Shuai. He didn't do anything excessive. The group walked on the waves, and they were very fast. Under the sea demon king's lead, they quickly headed towards the Moyun mountain range. In the end, Mu Yu still decided to make a trip to the Azure Dragon dynasty. Jian Ying, Chen Feng, and Xie Bulao were both missing. If he wanted to resist the threefold palace and save Jian Ying and Chen Feng, he could only rely on the demon kings. To Mu Yu, he felt that this was a bit laughable. For many years, humans and demonic beasts didn't see eye to eye with each other. When Mu Yu saved the white ape demon king, he was condemned by all the self-cultivators. Even Mu Yu felt that he was in the wrong. However, when he thought about it, he was right from the start. The self-cultivators were kept in the dark. They believed in the threefold palace, but the master of the threefold palace, Bai Jie, secretly framed all the true gods of the threefold continent. For his own selfish reasons, he put the threefold heaven in danger. At this time, only the demon kings could save the threefold heaven. The white ape demon king and the sea demon king hadn't completely recovered their cultivation, and the Azure Dragon demon king was the only demon king that hadn't been sealed. He relied on himself to avoid the detection of the heaven enforcers. As for how he did it, it was unknown. Mu Yu sat on the waves, facing the sea breeze. He looked at the waves in front of him and didn't say anything. "Mu Yu, don't worry about your master. I believe that the demon kings will help you." Qiao Shui sat beside Mu Yu and said softly. Mu Yu nodded and suddenly said, "Qiao Shui, do you remember the last time you came into contact with me, Mu Ling? Do you remember the power that surged out of your body?" Qiao Shui was startled and shook her head. "I don't like that bloodthirsty power." Mu Yu's bloodthirsty power almost made Qiao Shui lose control. Qiao Shui still had lingering fear when she thought about it. Mu Yu said, "You have to obtain this bloodthirsty power. The power you obtain will allow you to stay clear-headed. Otherwise, if Shui Yumeng finds you one day and imbues you with Xuanming's bloodthirsty power, you'll lose control." Old Tree Leader said that the other human were looking for the 5 of them. They wanted them to obtain the bloodthirsty power and lead the human to fight against the human race. The current situation wasn't optimistic. There were stronger enemies outside that wanted to wipe out the threefold heaven. However, the 3 races of the threefold heaven couldn't abandon their prejudices and wanted to fight against each other. The winner of this war was the threefold palace. Mu Yu had to stop this war. First, he had to overthrow the threefold palace, and then gather the power of the 3 races to fight against the powerful Heaven Keeper. Then, Mu Yu and the other 4 must stand up and lead their respective human. The premise of all this was to make themselves complete, obtain the bloodthirsty power, and become one with the sealed spirit Lord Human. After Qiao Shui understood Mu Yu's explanation, she asked, "Where do I go to create bloodthirsty power?" "The threefold palace, the people from the gate of hell, the silhouette being, and any black sheep in the cultivation world. I will help you to create bloodthirsty power," Mu Yu said calmly. Qiao Shui frowned slightly. She felt that Mu Yu's temperament seemed to have changed. In the past, Mu Yu wouldn't talk about bloodthirsty power so casually. This was because Mu Yu had always liked to live and didn't like the passing of life. However, she didn't object to it because some people really deserved to die. The waves rolled violently in the sea, and the Siren King stood on the waves, accepting the worship of the demon beasts. The shore of the Moyun mountain range was gradually visible. They had drifted on the sea for nearly 3 months, and finally, they were about to set foot on the threefold continent again. And on the shore, they unexpectedly saw a person. It was the old turtle who was attacked by Gui Yeming. Subordinate Gui Dingtian greets the Siren King, the old turtle said respectfully. The Siren King looked at the old turtle in surprise. You also have my blood in your body? The old turtle responded respectfully, Siren King, Elder Lu and I are here under the order of the White Ape Ancestor to help you to be reborn. Siren, you can strip the blood from my body now. The old turtle knew what the consequence of being stripped of his blood was, but he was ready to die after accepting this task. The Siren King waved his hand. No need, a little blood is enough. I will slowly recover the rest. Thank you for your hard work. Subordinate will do anything, the old turtle and Elder Lu said solemnly. You go and take care of him, the Siren King said to the old turtle. Old Tortoise answered and hurriedly helped Boss Lu up. Elder Lu's face was still a little pale at this time. Most of his blood had been stripped, but fortunately, the Siren King used demonic arts to help him recover some strength. Hey, old turtle, how did you escape from death? Long Tongue flew over and patted the old turtle's face with her tail. Siren True Dragon, it's like this. In the past, Subordinate was seriously injured and fell into a coma. Later, a sea turtle in the sea saved me and sent me back to the shore. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the way to the Demon Island, and those demon beasts didn't know where the Demon Island was. The old turtle quickly responded. The old turtle had been looking for the way to the Demon Island in the sea, but he was unlucky and couldn't find the real way, so he could only return to the shore to recuperate while waiting for news from others. Mu Yu looked at the sea and said, Siren King, I have to do something now. After that, I will go to the Azure Dragon Dynasty. Mu Yu still had one thing to do. In the chaotic burial valley of the Moyun mountain range, there was still a gap in the formation set up by Zhen Ying and Chen Feng. At that time, Mu Yu didn't control the power of nature, so he didn't fix it, only set up a simple formation. But since Mu Yu returned to the past and learned the power of nature from Deadwood Daddy, he was confident that he could fix the gap in the formation. You and Xiao Shui be careful, then we will go first. The Siren King nodded, he knew what Mu Yu was going to do. We will. Xiao Shui replied. Mu Yu didn't know where the demon race was, so Xiao Shui took Mu Yu with her. In the depths of the sea, a blood-red bone sank to the bottom of the sea. This bone was the lower jaw of a skull, it was still faintly rippling with blood-red ghost chi. That's right, soul return to mind is on Mu Yu. You must catch him. The voice of Gui Yezi came from the bone. He seemed to be talking to someone. Then Senior Gui Yezi, where are you? How do we find you? This was an unfamiliar yet familiar voice. If Mu Yu was here, he would definitely recognize it, because this was the voice of the master of the gate of hell. I am in the depths of the sea, there is not much time left, you won't be able to find me, remember. Find soul return to mind, only then can I be resurrected. Gui Yezi said coldly. Senior Gui Yezi, I understand. Ghost Lord's voice seemed to come from a distance, illusory, and then the light of the bone gradually dissipated, as if it could no longer maintain that spell. Gui Yezi harumphed fiercely, Mu Yu, you ruined my plan, I will definitely make you pay the price. The Blood Realm demonic puppet and Blood Realm demonic soul couldn't be destroyed by external forces, it would take 7 days to destroy them, and now the 7-day time limit was up. The blood on the skull slowly flowed away, all of the ghost chi gradually dimmed, the lower jaw becoming an ordinary white. Chapter 737. The 100-year-old yin chi in chaotic burial valley had already dissipated. The cries and howls had also disappeared. However, the nearby villagers still didn't dare to get close to chaotic burial valley. What happened to old Master Zhao had scared everyone out of their wits. Everyone changed the sky burial to earth burial. Although it was impossible to carry out a sky burial now, Mu Yu and Xiao Shui stood on top of chaotic burial valley and looked at the ruins in front of them. The entrance of Chaotic Burial Valley was tightly covered by floating rocks. The rocks were protected by a powerful formation. Even Mu Yu didn't have the ability to break it. He could only rely on plants to enter. Now, Mu Ling didn't dare to use it casually. Therefore, he relied on the root grass to go to the bottom of Chaotic Burial Valley. Qiao Shui followed closely behind in the water spirit. The two passed through the cracks in the rocks and quickly arrived at the sealed space barrier. Mu Yu easily came to the gap that Akatsuki had corroded. However, when he was about to use the power of nature to repair the gap, he was stunned. It was unknown when the gap had been completely repaired by someone. "Oh, who else would come here besides us?" Xiao Shui said in surprise. Mu Yu was also very surprised by this situation. When he wanted to repair the gap, he didn't succeed. He only set up some array formations around the gap. But now, these array formations were destroyed, and the gap was restored to its original state. "Could it be?" Dragon Vine exclaimed. It thought of a possibility: sword shadow dust wind. Mu Yu quickly touched the repaired formation pattern. He felt the power and vastness of the formation pattern. Then, he shook his head. "It's not Master's aura." Mu Yu's face darkened. At first, he thought that his master had personally come here to repair the gap. However, the spirit energy on the new formation pattern belonged to a stranger. It was different from the surrounding formation pattern. If the new formation pattern's aura came from his master, Mu Yu could at least be sure that his master had escaped. However, that wasn't the case. Then who could it be? There aren't many people in the cultivation world who are better at formations than you. It's not Elder Dead Tree, not Formation Heavenly Dao, not Sword Shadow Dust Wind. Could it be Xie Bulao or Third Palace? Qiao Shui said hesitantly. Bai Jie wouldn't be so kind. The killing intent in Mu Yu's eyes disappeared in an instant. He was very clear about the spiritual energy of the Third Palace. As for Xie Bulao, his spiritual energy had an innate evil aura that could not be concealed. It was very easy to identify him. From the looks of it, only Phantom Rain, who he had never seen before, had such an ability. That's right, if we can find Phantom Rain, then we might be able to turn things around. Mu Yu had seen Phantom Qingyu in Daoist Master Xian Jiz's image. Little Shui had also said that the phantom spirit he saw in the second heaven was following Phantom Qingyu. He would not be wrong about this, because phantom spirits and himself were both very strange existences. Phantom Rain was an immortal. After Jianying Chen Feng and Xie Yu Laro got into trouble, Phantom Rain became the strongest person. He indeed had the ability to save Jianying Chen Feng. Phantom Rain should have arrived in the third heaven. "Do you think he will go and save the white-bearded old man?" Little Shui asked, full of hope. Mu Yu muttered to himself for a while, then said, "No matter what the result is, we need to consider this matter at length. Since there is nothing here for the time being, we should hurry and find the Monster King and the others. We should see what they are planning." After confirming that there was no problem with the seal, he left the Chaotic Burial Valley and followed Qiao Shui out of the Moyun mountain range, heading towards the Azure Dragon dynasty. They did not expect to catch up to the Sea Monster King in time. After all, the Sea Monster King's speed was much faster than theirs. According to Qiao Shui's estimation, they would need at least 10 days to reach the Azure Dragon dynasty. After returning to the Third Heaven continent, Mu Yu stayed in Misty Breath City for a while. He needed to inquire about some things. After all, Mu Yu had been away from the cultivation world for a year and a half. Many things should have happened during this time. Old Tree Leader once said that Yuman was already secretly looking for the 5 of them. Once he found one of them, he would forcefully transfer the slaughter force of the previous Spirit Lord Yu Meng. The consequences would be unimaginable. Among the 5 of them, Xiong Nan was the one that Mu Yu was most worried about. This was because Xiong Nan's personality had become very stubborn. He wanted to rely on controlling cultivators to resist the Third Heaven Palace. 2 human could definitely use this to make Xiong Nan fall into the slaughter force. In comparison, Cheng Yang was the most reliable senior brother. Anything could happen to anyone except for Cheng Yang. Mu Yu did not know what Luo Shong's current situation was, But Luoshong knew what path he should take. Before he set down the 9 heavens sealing demon formation, he was already more capable of suppressing Spirit Lord Yu Meng's power than Mu Yu. Nothing had happened to Qiao Shui. However, Mu Yu had to help Qiao Shui obtain the slaughter force that belonged to her. Only then would Qiao Shui not have any chance to affect her. Lanshi City was still the same as before. There were not many changes. Cultivators were still coming and going. They were either trading with each other, resting, exchanging information, or discussing interesting things in the cultivation world. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The handsome statue of Jian Ying and Chen Feng still stood on top of the city tower of Misty Breath City. Under this statue, there was a formation that protected the entire city. When Yu Meng entered the city, there would be a strong alarm. When Mu Yu walked into the city, he could already feel the faint fluctuations of the formation. However, he did not have much hope for this formation. After all, he had been attacked by Yu Meng when he had just left the Moyun mountain range. At that time, he did not know how Yu Meng had managed to sneak into the city. However, Mu Yu had already vaguely guessed it. Let's go to the inn to rest. There are more people there, so we can get more information. Mu Yu said. He and Qiao Shui walked on the road. They deliberately suppressed their cultivation. At this age, the cultivation of the nascent soul stage wasn't very eye-catching in the crowd. It could only be considered average. However, Qiao Shui was very beautiful. She was like a lotus flower that had just broken out of the water. She would always attract a few more glances on the street. I don't like crowded places. Qiao Shui pursed her lips. It's fine. We just need to confirm that nothing big has happened in the cultivation world. Mu Yu brought Qiao Shui into a relatively prosperous inn. Guests came and went in the inn. It was very lively. Many cultivators were discussing the news that they had heard. Mu Yu and Qiao Shui sat in a corner and ordered a table full of dishes and 2 large plates of chicken drumsticks. Xiao Shui was very happy. The discussions of the cultivators reached Mu Yu's ears, but they were all unimportant things, such as which small sect had a new Supreme Immortal, the ranking of the Supreme Immortals had been refreshed today, the members had changed again, and so on, and which sect's young master had made a name for himself in the cultivation world. After such a long time, Mu Yu had almost forgotten about the Supreme Immortal leaderboard. He was currently ranked 43rd. Back then, he had obtained this ranking after killing Ying Shuo. After that, he had not appeared in the eyes of the world. Therefore, his ranking had not changed. Have you heard? The third-rate Western Immortal sect has a new genius. His name is Chu Kuang. In just a year, he has reached the body integration stage and squeezed into the 46th Supreme Immortal leaderboard. I remember that the Western Immortal sect's sect master, the Western Immortal Daoist, is only at the out-of-body stage. That's right. I heard that the Western Immortal Daoist was Chu Kuang's master. It should be something to celebrate that he cultivated such a talented person. However, Chu Kuang actually forced the Western Immortal Daoist to give up his position and took over the entire Western Immortal sect. He has the strength and his cultivation is several levels higher than the Western Immortal Daoist. It's normal that he doesn't want to lower himself to others. Normal? That's just forgetting the source. Which normal person would force their master to give up his position? That's true. However, ever since Clearwater City's Sikong Chiwen, more and more dark horses have appeared in the cultivation world. That's right. Bei Huili, Nan Shuda, Dong Renhua, and Shi Chu Kuang. These 4 people are known as the 4 heroes of the cultivation world. Although they are from a small sect, they are more famous than the outstanding disciples of the 8th sect. Speaking of which, Chu Kuang seems to be challenging the 45th Supreme Immortal in the Sword Cleansing Valley, the colored glass sword. The location is just outside Mist Breath City. I really have to go and take a look. The Supreme Immortals on the Supreme Immortal ranking are getting more and more powerful. In the past, the Supreme Immortals on the Supreme Immortal ranking were mostly disciples of the 8 sects. Ever since Sikong Chiwen, the Supreme Immortals of other small sects and clans have also appeared. The threefold palace has already announced to the world that the Supreme Immortal Ranking's final battle will be held in 8 months. At that time, all the Supreme Immortals will have to head to the center of the threefold continent. There will be a final battle there. If you don't go, you will be disqualified and the top 9 Supreme Immortals will be determined. The top 9 Supreme Immortals are known as the 9 Mystic Immortals. It will definitely be an unprecedented battle. I really want to know who the 9 Mystic Immortals of the human race will be. Nowadays, there are more and more dark horses in the cultivation world. We can't make an accurate prediction. However, I heard that the most popular one is the true God's disciple, Mu Yu. After all, the true God's disciple is the one who can create miracles the most. Many people want to challenge Mu Yu. However, Mu Yu has been missing for more than a year. The crowd was discussing fervently. Most of them were talking about the final battle of the Supreme Immortal Ranking in 8 months. In other words, the 9 Mystic Immortals would be selected. Apart from Mu Yu, many people from the cultivation world were also considered. This included Yi Feishue from the Earthly Imperial sect, Shimen Wuji from the Heretical sect, and the 4 heroes from the small sects. They were all popular candidates to become the 9 Mystic Immortals. Everyone was looking forward to seeing who would become the 9 Mystic Immortals. The final battle of the Supreme Immortal Ranking? The 9 Mystic Immortals? Mu Yu shook his head slightly. Fortunately, he had used the illusion array to change his appearance. Otherwise, he would have been recognized. The current Supreme Immortal Ranking had changed a long time ago. Dark horses would appear from time to time. The outside world thought that these people's rise was coincidental. Only Mu Yu knew the truth. These people were like Sikong Chiwen. They were all possessed by demons and were under Xiongnan's control. If Mu Yu's guess was correct, the 4 heroes from the small sects of the cultivation world should also be possessed by demons. Isn't this a good thing? If the threefold palace gathers the Supreme Immortals to fight Yu Meng in the future, these Supreme Immortals will become a variable, right? Qiao Shui asked. Qiao Shui had already heard from Mu Yu about what had happened in Clearwater City. Initially, Mu Yu did not want to tell anyone about this. However, Qiao Shui was also a member of the cultivation world. Hence, she had to know. It's hard to say. The real commanders of the human race are the 9 Mystic Immortals. In my opinion, the 9 Mystic Immortals are all under the control of the threefold palace. Xiongnan is still ranked 9th. He will become a thorn in the side of the threefold palace, Mu Yu said. The 9 Mystic Immortals were a supreme existence. Even the sect leaders of the 8 sects did not dare to offend them. Since the threefold palace's purpose of starting a war was to create a massacre, he naturally would not allow any unstable factors to appear in the leaders of this war. Do we need to help Xiongnan? Qiao Shui asked. Mu Yu rubbed his chin and shook his head. Xiongnan doesn't need our help. I have a better idea. Tell me. We want to become a 9 Mystic Immortals too. Chapter 738. Mu Yu was already at the body integration stage, so he had to raise his cultivation to a higher level in 8 months. The Supreme Immortal Leaderboard was originally created to fight against human. The reason why the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard was scheduled for 8 months later was because human had become even more rampant in the past year. He had engaged in countless conflicts with cultivators. Now, every city was on high alert to prevent human from sneaking into the city again and causing unimaginable consequences. If cultivators encountered human outside, they had to immediately find someone to help them eliminate human. This information alone was not enough, but Mu Yu at least had a preliminary understanding of the current situation in the cultivation world. Human did not launch a large-scale attack, which meant that they had not found a leader yet. Qiao Shui, where did you get the water spirit? Mu Yu had never asked Qiao Shui this question. Now that he thought about it, he had obtained it after coming into contact with Old Tree Leader. So didn't this mean that Qiao Shui had also come into contact with Shui Yumeng? Grandpa Azure Dragon gave it to me. I didn't ask where it came from, but the water spirit is a very useful item, Qiao Shui said with a shrug. Needless to say, You must have stolen it from Shui Yumeng, Mu Yu said helplessly. With the Azure Dragon Monster King's strength, it was more than enough to find Shui Yumeng and steal his holy item. At that time, Shui Yumeng had no leader and could not resist the Azure Dragon Monster King. Qiao Shui smiled and did not refute. Do you feel that something is missing from the water spirit? When Mu Yu first obtained the Mu Ling was riddled with holes and had lost most of its spiritual energy. Old Tree Leader told him that only by killing people could the holes be repaired. Only by killing people could the Mu Ling's abilities be fully unleashed. Now that Mu Yu had obtained the power to kill and repaired the Mu Ling, he was very resistant to it. Something is indeed missing, but I don't know what it is, so I didn't look into it, Qiao Shui replied honestly. Just like Mu Ling, he became incomplete because he was deprived of the power to kill, Mu Yu said in a low voice. Qiao Shui fell into silence for a moment before she softly said, I've never killed anyone since I was young. I only killed some demonic beasts that were hard to tame. I don't like killing people. In the demon race, Qiao Shui's status was very high. The demon race treated her very well, so there was no need for her to kill anyone. She had never come into contact with cultivators, so she had never really killed anyone. Mu Yu held Qiao Shui's hand and said, Don't worry. Leave the killing to me and Shui Ling, you don't need to do anything. Just like how Mu Yu didn't personally kill the flesh-winged horned monsters, those moon people still died in his life force and were absorbed by Mu Ling. Shui Ling also needed the power to kill. Only then would Shui Yu not be able to take advantage of the situation. Qiao Shui nodded. The two of them were about to leave the inn, but at this time, the inn suddenly quieted down. Two people walked in from the door, one old and one young. The younger one looked like he was only in his 20s, but his cultivation was at the unity body stage. The old one had white hair and beard, and looked like he was in his 70s or 80s. He humbly bowed beside the young man, and his cultivation was only at the out-of-body stage. He looked like the young man's servant. After the old man and the young man walked into the inn, the entire inn was quiet for a moment. Then, whispers began to sound. Speaking of the devil, isn't that the 46th extreme immortal Chu Kuang? The one beside him is his master, the Western immortal Daoist, right? Although his talent is good, he has forgotten his root. I heard that the Western immortal Daoist was forced to become Chu Kuang's servant. After his cultivation soared, not only did he snatch the position of sect master from his master, he even made his master his servant. He really raised an ingrate. I heard that this person used to have a good character, but after he became a dark horse on the extreme immortal ranking, he became unreasonable. No one in the Western immortal sect dares to disobey his orders. Many people in the crowd were whispering to each other. Everyone recognized Chu Kuang's strength as one of the four heroes of the cultivation world. As for his character, he was disgraced by everyone. It was hard to believe that such a person would forget his roots. Go and book 2 rooms for me, Chu Kuang lazily said. Yes, yes, yes. Sect Master, please wait a moment, the Western immortal Daoist respectfully said. He didn't dare to neglect and quickly walked to the counter. Chu Kuang, on the other hand, glanced at the entire inn and finally walked towards the empty seat beside Mu Yu. Along the way, Chu Kuang inadvertently glanced at Qiao Shui's beautiful face, and his eyes suddenly lit up. What a beautiful girl! Chu Kuang exclaimed. He ignored the gazes of the people around him and wantonly swept his eyes over Qiao Shui's body. Mu Yu frowned. At this time, the Western immortal Daoist quickly walked over. He glanced at Mu Yu and Qiao Shui's cultivation and inadvertently shook his head. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. He knew that his disciple, whose personality had changed greatly, was going to make a move on them again. Sect Master, please sit here, the Western immortal Daoist quickly said. However, Chu Kuang didn't pay attention to the Western immortal Daoist at all. Instead, he went straight to Mu Yu's table and sat down as if there was no one around. Miss, I'm Chu Kuang. May I know your name? Chu Kuang also directly ignored Mu Yu. The Western immortal Daoist quickly followed and said to Mu Yu and Qiao Shui, fellow Taoists, my sect master has taken a fancy to this seat. Do you two want to go somewhere else first? This meal is on me. Old fart, do you think you have the right to speak here? Chu Kuang suddenly raised his eyes and a wave of qi swept out from his body and hit the Western Immortal Daoist. The Western Immortal Daoist was immediately sent flying and heavily slammed into the wall, creating a huge hole in it. Everyone secretly spat at Chu Kuang. This guy even dared to hit his own master so hard. He really wasn't afraid of being struck by lightning. Miss, we don't have to pay attention to that old man who ruined the mood just now. Miss, you're as beautiful as a fairy. Why don't you spend a good night with me? Chu Kuang's eyes revealed a trace of lasciviousness as he wantonly swept his eyes over Xiao Shue's body. Let's go. Xiao Shue didn't want to cause trouble and got up to leave the inn. Mu Yu also stood up silently and walked outside. However, Chu Kuang stopped them once again. Miss, where are you going in such a hurry? Chu Kuang laughed. All the onlookers shook their heads and didn't dare to stop them. Just now, the Western Immortal Daoist wanted the two of them to leave so that they wouldn't be harassed by his disciple. Unfortunately, Chu Kuang was so crazy that he even hit his own master so hard. How could he be so kind as to let these two go? Sigh. These two are really unlucky to have met someone like Chu Kuang. It's a pity for this lady. Such a beautiful flower is about to be destroyed. The onlookers shook their heads and sighed. Chu Kuang was a dark horse on the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard. His strength was so high that no one dared to provoke him. They could only look at Xiao Shue and Mu Yu with sympathy. The Western Immortal Daoist struggled to get up from the ruins. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked disappointed. He was originally a good person, but after returning from Clearwater City, he became a completely different person. His cultivation improved rapidly and everyone in the sect saw hope. However, they didn't expect him to become so temperamental. Mu Yu didn't look at Chu Kuang. Instead, he said calmly to Xiao Shue, "How about he be your first?" Xiao Shue hesitated for a moment, and there was a hint of struggle in her eyes. In the end, she gritted her teeth and nodded. Chu Kuang didn't know what Mu Yu was talking about, but he laughed. "What? Am I still your first man? That's lucky. However, you're not the first woman I've played with. Sect Master, we're here to challenge the lapis lazuli sword of the Sword Cleansing Valley. I think we shouldn't cause trouble and let these two insignificant people leave." The Western Immortal Daoist walked over and said sincerely. Chu Kuang's expression turned cold. "Try saying another word. If it weren't for the fact that you still have a use for me, I would have killed you long ago." The Western Immortal Daoist's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He hurriedly said, Yes, I know my mistake. Kneel to the side, you impatient bastard." Chu Kuang said coldly. The Western Immortal Daoist's face turned pale. He walked to the side and knelt down. Everyone was in an uproar again. This Chu Kuang was really inhumane. He actually made his master kneel to him in front of everyone. Mu Yu was very angry. What he hated the most were people who deceived their masters and killed their ancestors. Such a disloyal and unfilial guy deserved to die 10,000 times. He silently walked to the front of the Western Immortal Daoist and pulled him up from the ground. "Fellow Daoist, don't be impulsive. You should leave here quickly." The Western Immortal Daoist looked at Chu Kuang with some fear. He wanted to kneel down again, but Mu Yu's hand emitted a spiritual power that restrained his whole body. There was also a majestic spiritual power at his knees that prevented him from kneeling. The Western Immortal Daoist looked at Mu Yu with some shock. Mu Yu clearly looked like he was only at the nascent soul stage, but he, a dignified out-of-body cultivator, was restrained by his spiritual power and couldn't even move. Mu Yu patted the Western Immortal Daoist's shoulder comfortingly, then turned to look at Chu Kuang. "You want your master to kneel to you? Can you accept it with a clear conscience?" Chu Kuang coldly looked at Mu Yu, who only had nascent soul stage fluctuations, and sneered. "You want to protect this old fart?" Mu Yu smiled faintly. "I just saw injustice on the road. Old fart, did you tell him what happened to the person who protected you last time?" Chu Kuang sneered. The Western Immortal Daoist showed a pained expression. He bit his lips, closed his eyes, and said in a trembling voice, "The sect master's orders are everything. Anyone who disobeys will die. So you still remember. But I didn't tell you to stand up just now." A murderous intent pervaded the Western Immortal Daoist. The Western Immortal Daoist's face was already sweating like rain, but he couldn't kneel. "What? Do you still need me to help you?" Chu Kuang suddenly attacked. His figure flashed behind the Western Immortal Daoist, and he kicked the Western Immortal Daoist's knee. Bang! Chu Kuang's foot seemed to have kicked a solid wall, and the Western Immortal Daoist's knee rippled. "You have some skills, but no one has ever dared to stop me from teaching my servant a lesson." Chu Kuang clenched his hand into a claw and grabbed the Western Immortal Daoist's throat. But a sword slashed through Chu Kuang's hand, and the Western Immortal Daoist was already taken away by Mu Yu. "Who are you? I've never heard of you." Chu Kuang looked at Mu Yu playfully. Mu Yu said calmly, "What? You're a beast, but you still can't change your despicable bestial nature. You." Chapter 739. Everyone thought that Mu Yu was calling Chu Kuang a beast, but only Chu Kuang himself knew what Mu Yu was talking about. "Say that again." Chu Kuang's eyes flashed with the wildness of a beast. He was enraged by Mu Yu's words, and a red light that didn't belong to a beast flashed in his eyes. A beast will always be a beast. Even if you wear human skin, you can't change your nature. Mu Yu shook his head. "How do you know? Who are you?" Chu Kuang roared. "The person who's going to kill you." Mu Yu's eyes flashed with hostility. He took out Helion Kong's soul tool and wrapped Xiao Shue's water spirit around it. The water spirit emitted a dazzling blue light and trembled in Mu Yu's hand, as if it was anticipating what would happen next. Everyone in the inn thought that they had heard wrong. Mu Yu, who looked like he was only at the nascent soul stage, wanted to kill Chu Kuang, who was ranked 46th on the Supreme Immortal ranking. Could it be that this guy was joking? Is there something wrong with this kid's brain? He's only at the nascent soul stage, but he dares to say such things. He knows that he's going to die, but he still wants to die with dignity. He's a real man. What a pity. He could have offended anyone, but he had to offend Chu Kuang. The surrounding self-cultivators shook their heads and sighed. They all looked at Mu Yu as if they were looking at a dead man. Everyone in the cultivation world had witnessed how powerful Chu Kuang was over the past year. They did not think that Mu Yu would be able to defeat Chu Kuang, a dark horse on the Supreme Immortal leaderboard who was far stronger than Sikong Chiwen. "You want to kill me? Who do you think you are?" Chu Kuang's body erupted with powerful body integration stage spiritual energy. The violent spiritual energy instantly tore the floor apart. All the self-cultivators ran away from Chu Kuang, afraid that they would be implicated. The Supreme Immortal ranking was no longer the same as before. There were many Supreme Immortals at the body integration stage. Those who hadn't reached the out-of-body stage couldn't enter the Supreme Immortal ranking. The innkeeper was on the verge of tears. He wanted to step out and say, "Fighting is not allowed in this inn." However, he was facing the dark horse of the Supreme Immortal leaderboard, Chu Kuang. How could he dare to say anything? He was afraid that before he could even open his mouth, he would become a ghost under the other party's hand. "I'm a human, but you're not." Mu Yu raised the soul armament in his hand that contained the water spirit. Chu Kuang's face was already distorted. He roared and stomped on the ground, creating a big hole. His hands turned into claws and pounced towards Mu Yu. His speed was very fast, so fast that the onlookers couldn't react in time. By the time they saw Chu Kuang's figure clearly, his hand was only an inch away from Mu Yu's throat. Everyone secretly shook their heads, feeling sorry for Mu Yu. Mu Yu had paid the price for offending an extreme immortal who was devoid of humanity. Some people even closed their eyes or turned their heads away. They couldn't bear to see Mu Yu's throat being crushed. However, after waiting for a long time, they found that Chu Kuang's figure was still in the air. His hand didn't touch Mu Yu's throat. Time seemed to have stopped at that moment. Only a clear sound echoed in the inn. Drip. A drop of blood fell on the floor under Mu Yu's feet. The floor under Mu Yu's feet was intact, without any damage. Everyone looked towards the source of the blood. Suddenly, they were all stunned. Chu Kuang's heart had been pierced through by Mu Yu's soul armament at some point in time. Chu Kuang's eyes widened. He lowered his head in disbelief and looked at the bloody hole in his chest. He didn't understand how his chest was pierced through in just one move. However, he would never understand. The blue water spirit released a strange suction force, sucking something from his body. Chu Kuang's consciousness slowly dissipated. At the last moment, he only had time to let out an unwilling whimper. His body slowly stiffened, and his life force quickly flowed out of his body. Bang! Chu Kuang's body fell to the ground like a dead dog, making a loud crashing sound. This sound also knocked on everyone's heart, causing their eyelids to twitch. That was Chu Kuang, who was ranked 46th on the Supreme Immortal ranking. After arrogantly defeating many opponents, he was defeated by an unfamiliar man just like that. Who was this person? A faint white light emerged from his body. Mu Yu's expression changed. The shadow-cloned sword responded and temporarily removed the restriction. Mu Ling immediately swallowed the white light. Mu Yu wouldn't give the Triple Palace any chance to strengthen his soul power. Killing Chu Kuang in an instant was not worth mentioning to him. Previously, he had used He Lienkong's soul armament to deal with Gui Shiren when he was at the Severed Soul stage. Now that he had stepped into the body integration stage, the power of his soul armament made his cultivation almost on par with those at the 9th celestial stage of the body integration stage. He felt that after stepping into the body integration stage, he could use his soul armament to fight against Gui Yeming when he was at the crossing calamity stage. Let's go. Mu Yu untied the water spirit from his soul armament. The water spirit was still as smooth as silk and wasn't stained with any blood. It just had an indescribable liveliness. Xiao Shui took the water spirit and left the inn with Mu Yu under everyone's shocked gazes. After that, the entire inn was in an uproar. Mu Yu had already used an illusion array before entering the city to hide his true appearance. Xiao Shui had grown up in the monster race and didn't show her face in the cultivation world. Therefore, no one in the inn recognized the two of them. At this moment, everyone was guessing the identity of the two people. Some people had already chased after them, but Mu Yu and Xiao Shui's figures gradually disappeared into the bustling crowd. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air in the blink of an eye. Outside the mist breath city, Mu Yu and Xiao Shui didn't fly. They walked slowly along the small path outside the city. That person just now, was he controlled by Xiongnan? Xiao Shui asked. Mu Yu nodded. Xiongnan used his ability to fuse the consciousness of a monster with a human. I think those dark horses on the Supreme Immortal rankings were all created by Xiongnan. However, these people are monsters that can't gain intelligence. Even if they fuse with a human, they still have the wild nature of a monster. Those creatures could not be counted as human beings at all. They did not care about family or master in their eyes. It was not easy for them to be human beings, not to mention that they were on the ranking list of supreme deities. They thought that they were superior to other cultivators and did not care about other cultivators at all. It was entirely possible for them to do something as insane as asking their master to be their servant. After all, the monster soul in Chu Kuang's body didn't recognize the Western Immortal Daoist as his master. I thought you wouldn't interfere with Xiongnan's plans. Xiao Shui recalled what Mu Yu had said before. Mu Yu shook his head. I won't interfere with his plans. However, the monster soul he controlled just now dared to flirt with the girl I like. I won't let him live. After a pause, Mu Yu continued. Xiongnan won't mind if I kill this monster soul. Xiao Shui's face suddenly turned red. She felt a sense of comfort in her heart. When Mu Yu said the words "the girl I like," her heart actually started beating non-stop. Sir, please wait. The Western Immortal Daoist's voice came from behind. Mu Yu stopped and looked at the panting Western Immortal Daoist. Western Immortal, thank you for getting rid of a vile disciple for me. I will never forget your kindness. Please accept my gratitude. The Western Immortal Daoist wanted to kneel down and express his gratitude, But Mu Yu didn't let him. You don't have to thank me. There were some things I had to do. Mu Yu shook his head. Xiong Nan controlled those people so that they could fight against the third palace in the future. He shouldn't have let them be arrogant and despotic and destroy other people's lives. Sir, you don't know. What did that vile disciple do to us? Maybe it's just a small matter for you, but it's a grace of rebirth for our entire sect. The Western immortal Daoist actually shed turbid tears as he spoke. Excitement and resentment mixed together, causing his entire body to tremble. His aura also became chaotic, as if he had finally vented all the resentment he had accumulated for a long time, but because he was too happy, he couldn't straighten out his aura. You were treated like this by him. Why didn't you leave quietly? Xiao Shui walked over and patted the Western immortal Daoist's shoulder. A cold aura entered the Western immortal Daoist's body, causing his heart to gradually calm down. The Western immortal Daoist felt a trace of coldness in his body and was flattered. He quickly said, "Thank you, Fairy. Fairy, you don't know, but if it weren't for protecting the others in my sect, I would have already killed myself. How could I have been humiliated like this? Sigh. It's all my fault as a master. Who would have thought that he would suddenly change his temperament? When he made us kneel, my little disciple stepped forward to protect him, but he actually broke his neck with a claw." The Western immortal Daoist was heartbroken. He still couldn't forget that scene. After Chu Kuang returned from Clearwater City, it was as if he had suddenly become a different person. His cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he had even broken into the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard. This was originally something worthy of celebration from the entire sect, but they didn't expect a nightmare to befall this sect. After Chu Kuang's cultivation surpassed the Western Immortal Daoist's, he began to be arrogant and looked down on his fellow sect members. He would hurt them without saying a word. The Western Immortal Daoist could only endure the humiliation for the sake of the lives of the entire sect. He agreed to be his disciple's servant so that he could secretly protect the others in the sect. Mu Yu was silent for a long time. He knew why Chu Kuang didn't kill the Western Immortal Daoist. The Western Immortal Daoist was originally the leader of a sect, so he knew far more than Chu Kuang. He stayed behind to collect information for Chu Kuang and explain the situation of the cultivation world. After all, Chu Kuang was possessed by a demon soul. How could he know so much about the ways of the world? He could only rely on the Western Immortal Daoist. Although he humiliated Chu Kuang, he didn't kill him. This was because Chu Kuang, as a demon soul, didn't have any brains. He only had brute force, but he still had the wild nature of a demon beast. Therefore, he wanted to be above everyone and order people around. Mu Yu sighed. He took out a few bottles of 5th-grade healing pills and handed them to the Western Immortal Daoist. "Take these pills back and give them to your disciples. Take it as an apology." "Apology? Sir, you must be joking. You're our benefactor. Everyone in the sect is grateful for your kindness. How could we dare to covet your pills? Today, I chased after you only to thank you in person. I have nothing to repay you with, so please accept my bow," the Western Immortal Daoist said sincerely. "There's no need for that. Many things aren't as simple as you think. Take these pills back. We still have matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave first." Mu Yu didn't want to accept the Western Immortal Daoist's bow. This matter was caused by Xiong Nan, so he was only apologizing on Xiong Nan's behalf. However, he couldn't bring this matter to light. He could only apologize for Xiong Nan in some way. However, when he thought about it, there were thousands of people like Chu Kuang in the cultivation world. How many innocent victims like the Western Immortal Daoist would be bullied and humiliated by people like Chu Kuang? Could Mu Yu really stand by and do nothing about what Xiong Nan had done? Mu Yu and Xiao Shui looked at the Western Immortal Daoist with complicated feelings. They killed Chu Kuang whenever they encountered him, but what about the others? The two of them had just floated into the air when the Western Immortal Daoist firmly bowed in Mu Yu's direction and kowtowed 3 times. Chapter 740. Have you heard? 7 days ago, Chu Kuang died in the hands of an unknown person. I heard about it too. That's not all. On the 3rd day, I heard that Dong Renhua was also defeated by a mysterious person. I heard that Shu Da from the South Howl sect was also thrown down from the stargazing tower in the Heartless City yesterday. He was seriously injured. Bei Huili, Nan Shuda, Dong Renhua, and Shi Chu Kuang. Chu Kuang is dead, and Shu Da and Renhua were taught a lesson. It's said that their personalities changed drastically after they returned. That leaves only Huili from the North Nether sect. The 4 of them are renowned dark horses on the extreme immortal rankings. Just like Sikong Chiwan, they're from small sects and clans, but their strengths and cultivations aren't inferior to Sikong Chiwan in the past. However, their reputations are too great. Even though their strengths are great, their characters are terrible, so they deserve to be taught a lesson. It seems that there's another dark horse on the Supreme Immortal Ranking Board who can teach these 4 people a lesson. I just don't know where this dark horse will come from. In the past few days, the cultivation world had been abuzz with the news that the 4 heroes of a small sect had been taught a lesson. Many meddlesome cultivators were guessing the identity of the mysterious person. Who on earth had the strength to teach these 4 arrogant and domineering extreme immortals a lesson? However, the strange thing was that after 3 of the 4 heroes were defeated, there was no eye-catching name on the Supreme Immortal Ranking Board. Everyone immediately understood that a genius Supreme Immortal at the top of the Supreme Immortal Ranking Board must have disliked the 4 heroes, so he taught them a lesson. This was the only explanation for why no one replaced the 3 heroes after they were defeated. But at the same time, everyone's attention was focused because among the 4 heroes of the cultivation world, Huili's strength had increased the fastest, and he was ranked 30th. If Huili was taught a lesson again, then it meant that this person's ranking was at least within the top 30. The North Nether sect. The North Nether sect used to be a small sect, and its former leader, Daoist Wenyang, was only at the 5th heavenly layer of out-of-body realm. For the experts of the 3rd heaven of out-of-body realm, the 5th heavenly layer was nothing worth mentioning. However, ever since Daoist Wenyang's disciple, Huili, returned from Clearwater City, his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. In less than a year, he had actually advanced from the nascent soul stage to the body integration stage. This was a huge matter for the North Nether sect. Everyone in the sect thought that the North Nether sect would rise under Huili's leadership. However, Huili seemed to have turned into a different person all of a sudden. He became temperamental and arrogant, completely ignoring his elders. In the conference hall of the North Nether sect, Huili sat loftily on the sect master's seat carved from gold and white jade, hugging a beautiful woman in his arms. That woman was like a sheep nestled on his lap. His eyes flashed with an uncontrollable beast light from time to time. Below him, there were more than 10 people kneeling. These people were the original elders of the North Nether sect. Even Huili's master, Daoist Wenyang, was kneeling on the ground in fear, not daring to raise his head to look at his disciple. So, Chu Kuang is dead, and Renhua and Shu Da are seriously injured. Huili asked slowly. Reporting to the sect master, the information is accurate. Daoist Wenyang lowered his head to the ground. His voice was filled with panic, trying his best not to show any abnormality in his expression. However, Daoist Wenyang's heart was filled with excitement. He was looking forward to the mysterious swordsman standing up and teaching this disloyal and unfilial person a lesson. He wanted to get rid of his evil disciple and let the resentful souls of the disciples who died tragically in the sect rest in peace. You seem to be very happy about this news. Huili pushed the beautiful woman away and slowly walked down, stopping beside Daoist Wenyang. You must be joking, sect master. Wenyang wouldn't dare to have any disloyalty towards you, sect master, Daoist Wenyang said fearfully. Raise your head, Huili said lightly. Daoist Wenyang raised his head while trembling, but he still didn't dare to look directly at his disciple. His disciple's cultivation base was at the form synthesis stage, which was far higher than his out-of-body stage master. It was something to be proud of, but at this time, he was extremely afraid. Huili stretched out the tip of his foot, tipped Daoist Wen-Yang's chin, and sneered, "Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. But you'd better give up. I'm not those three good-for-nothings. If he dares to come, I'll kill him. If you want to live, you'd better listen to me." Daoist Wen-Yang was terrified. He thought of Huai Li's current cultivation base and his current ranking. He was ranked 30th on the Supreme Immortal list. If it was in the past, Daoist Wen-Yang would have been extremely excited. The Supreme Immortal leaderboard represented the 99 most talented young talents in the cultivation world. It was truly amazing that such an outstanding disciple had emerged from a small, mediocre sect like his. However, Daoist Wen-Yang couldn't be excited now. After Huai Li had attained a cultivation base, he seemed to have changed into a different person. There was a faint ferocity of a wild beast in his body, and the relationship between master and disciple in the past had long been forgotten. "I don't dare to offend you, sect master. Please investigate this matter," Daoist Wen-Yang said in a panic. He didn't know that his disciple was no longer the same person. Huai Li was indeed a ferocious beast. After a ferocious beast took over his consciousness, he had no feelings for his original family or sect at all. "Even if you want to offend me, you don't have the ability to do so. I can trample you under my feet for the rest of my life." Huai Li laughed and kicked Daoist Wen-Yang over. Then, he stepped on Daoist Wen-Yang's chest fiercely. The nature of a ferocious beast was fully revealed. Daoist Wen-Yang sighed in his heart. His ribs hurt, but he didn't dare to resist. He didn't have the ability to resist. A beast will always be a beast. You don't even know how to restrain your beastly nature after becoming a human. A calm voice resounded throughout the meeting hall. A figure slowly walked in from outside the hall. Everyone who was kneeling suddenly became excited. Could this strange voice be the mysterious person who came to punish the evil disciples of the various sects? Daoist Wen-Yang was also very excited. Tears flowed down from the corners of his eyes. That nameless young hero has finally come. God has finally opened his eyes. Huai Li looked coldly at the stranger in front of him. The aura of the 6th level of the combination realm suddenly spread out from his body. "Are you that wild brat who wants to stand up for himself?" Huai Li looked at Mu Yu with disdain. In fact, these demon souls had seen Mu Yu in the desert of Clearwater City. However, Mu Yu had changed his appearance so Huai Li couldn't recognize him. "I'm here to deal with the aftermath." Mu Yu shook his head slightly. Xiong Nan had so many demon souls under his control, and they were obedient to his command. But they still could not change their nature as ferocious beasts and bullied the cultivators. How different were the demon souls who did not treat the lives of the cultivators any different from the threefold palace? Aftermath. Ha ha ha. I think you're here to die. Huai Li stood up in anger and rushed towards Mu Yu. Demon beasts will always be demon beasts. They always like to be self-righteous. The soul weapon in Mu Yu's hand surged. An even more powerful aura instantly shrouded the entire conference hall of the North Nether sect. All the elders of the North Nether sect felt as if a storm was coming. They were shivering on the reef in the face of the rolling waves. They couldn't even stabilize their bodies and could be swallowed by the waves at any time. However, the waves receded very quickly. It was as if all the turbulent waves had calmed down in the blink of an eye. The dark clouds dispersed and the sun shone in. The sea was calm again. Huai Li was lying motionless on the ground like a dead dog. "All of you, get up," Mu Yu said amiably. Only then did Daoist Wen-Yang react. He got up from the ground and looked at Huai Li, who was lying beside Mu Yu, with a bewildered look on his face. You're the nameless young hero who punishes evil?" Daoist Wen-Yang asked respectfully. He was also shocked. Huai Li was a Supreme Immortal ranked 30th on the Supreme Immortal leaderboard. However, he couldn't even withstand one move from this strange man in front of him. Which sect did this Supreme Immortal come from? Nameless young hero? Is that how outsiders address me? Mu Yu smiled. He didn't care about these empty titles. "My lord, Huai Li," Daoist Wen-Yang's eyes were still wandering because Huai Li, who was lying beside Mu Yu's feet, was still alive. As long as this evil disciple was alive, their sect would never have peace. If they didn't kill this evil disciple now, they would be the ones to die when he woke up. He's not dead. I won't kill him, Mu Yu said. Daoist Wenyang's expression was uncertain. He said earnestly, "My lord, if you don't kill him, then in the future." Before he could finish his words, Huai Li's hand suddenly moved. Then, he slowly got up from the ground. Huai Li didn't seem to be injured at all. He patted his clothes as if nothing had happened and glanced at everyone. Daoist Wenyang and the other elders' expressions suddenly changed. Their hearts were in their throats again. Huai Li was still alive. At this moment, Huai Li's gaze also fell on Daoist Wenyang. He actually walked straight towards Daoist Wenyang. Daoist Wenyang hurriedly lowered his head, thinking that Huai Li would come over to take revenge on him. Thinking of his disciple's ferocity, he panicked and wanted to kneel down in front of his disciple. However, at this moment, Huai Li suddenly bent his legs and knelt in front of Daoist Wenyang. Huai Li greets Master. Master, if you need anything, please tell me. Huai Li kowtowed heavily to Daoist Wenyang. What? Daoist Wenyang's mind went blank. The disciple who had just stepped on him was now kneeling in front of him? What was going on? The other elders were also stunned. They looked in disbelief at the devil who had done all kinds of evil in the past year. They couldn't understand how this unfilial disciple had changed his personality. Master, he. Daoist Wenyang still couldn't believe it. He rubbed his eyes hard. After confirming that the person kneeling in front of him was his crazy disciple, he still couldn't accept this fact. Those who have been to Qingshui City have all been cast a mysterious spell by Sikong Chiwen. Their personality will change drastically. I'm just using a more powerful spell to return him back to normal. However, that spell has caused him to lose his self-awareness. Now, he's like a walking corpse. He will listen to any of your orders in the future and won't disobey. Don't worry, Mu Yu explained patiently. He'll listen to my orders. Daoist Wenyang was stunned. As the sect leader, he was only in the out-of-body stage. Normally, they would have to submit to Huai Li's powerful strength. They didn't dare to disobey Huai Li's orders. Who would have thought that there would be a day where they could control Huai Li? Chapter 741. You can order him to do anything you want. You can also let him continue to cultivate and reach a higher cultivation level to defeat other supreme immortals. He will listen to you. You can use him to help your sect rise. He is now equivalent to a puppet. Mu Yu walked out of the hall as soon as he finished speaking. A perfect soul formation was the most suitable solution Mu Yu could think of. He did not want to interfere with Xiongnan's plan because Xiongnan's matter had already been settled and could not be changed. Dark horses like the four heroes of the cultivation world were still useful. If they could occupy a place on the Supreme Immortal Ranking Board, it would have a great impact on the Threefold Palaces plan. As for Chu Kuang's death, it was only because he took liberties with Qiao Shui. Sir, please wait, sir. Daoist Wenyang finally reacted. He wanted to ask Mu Yu to stay to express his gratitude, but Mu Yu had already disappeared. Daoist Wenyang looked at Huai Li, who was kneeling on the ground in fear. He recalled how he had been humiliated by his disciple and mustered up his courage to shout, "Unfilial disciple, you deserve this. Go and kowtow to all the elders and admit your mistakes." "Yes, master." Huai Li stood up expressionlessly and really kowtowed to every elder that he had insulted in the past to admit his wrongs. Moreover, he was quite sincere as he kowtowed loudly. It's true. Daoist Wenyang was overwhelmed with emotions. He finally believed Mu Yu's words. A flying sword appeared in his hand and he placed it against Huai Li's neck. He wanted to kill his disciple with his own hands, but he hesitated. It was not easy for a sect to have a supreme immortal in the form synthesis stage. Moreover, he was a genius ranked 30th on the Supreme Immortal Ranking Board. It would be a pity to kill him. Back then, when I named you Huai Li, I hoped that you would treat others with respect, but you walked on the opposite path. You can atone for your sins by becoming a puppet in the future. Just think of it as your contribution to the rise of the sect. Daoist Wen-yang, whose cultivation level was only at the 5th heavenly stage of the out-of-body stage, said quietly. Qiao Shui and Mu Yu sat cross-legged on a hillside. The sky was filled with stars and the night breeze was blowing gently. Originally, I wanted to kill them to collect the power of slaughter for you. However, although they have done many evil things, they are not completely useless. I'll talk to the silhouette being and the gate of hell, Mu Yu said while grilling the leg of a fiery pig. He was now ranked 30th on the Extreme Immortal leaderboard. However, he did not allow Huai Li's Extreme Immortal mark to attach to his arm. As for his original Extreme Immortal mark, it had long since disappeared, so he could not exchange it with Huai Li. The outside world still did not know what had happened. Take it slow. I'm not in a hurry to kill. Qiao Shui was the same as Mu Yu. She rejected that feeling. They had been in the cultivation world for almost a month now. During this time, Mu Yu had been searching for the famous dark horses on the Supreme Immortal leaderboard. Xiong Nan had created too many demons and occupied almost half of the Supreme Immortal leaderboard. As for how to differentiate between a demon and not a demon, it was actually very simple. Most of these people who had the consciousness of a demon soul were violent. They looked down on cultivators who were weaker than them and bullied the people around them. The big sects were still fine. At least they had more powerful people above them, so they did not dare to be too presumptuous. However, the cultivators from the small sects were very miserable. The excitement of the dark horses had not died down yet, but the cultivators from the small sects were already complaining incessantly. It's a pity that these people don't know where Xiong Nan is. Otherwise, I would go and find out where Xiong Nan is. Mu Yu had always wanted to find Xiong Nan. He wanted to know if Xiong Nan was still safe and whether he was threatened by Tu Yumeng. However, according to the demons, Xiong Nan had not contacted them since he had taken control of them. Because of this, the demons had become unscrupulous. Sikong Chiwen was not as arrogant in the past because Xiong Nan had been controlling Sikong Chiwen, so Sikong Chiwen did not dare to do anything that crossed the line. How long can your soul formation control them? If you meet Xiong Nan in the future, will you have a better control over them or Xiong Nan? Qiao Shui knew that Mu Yu had used the soul formation to control Xiong Nan's puppets, but they were also under Xiong Nan's control. Therefore, if they met in the future, they would have to face this problem. Mu Yu shook his head. Xiong Nan has a better control over them than me. This is inevitable. They have the consciousness of a demon soul in them. I can't erase it. I can only change their memories and turn them into walking corpses. However, Xiong Nan has the ability to wake them up. Xiong Nan controls them but doesn't care about them. If he doesn't make them behave, they will attract the attention of the Threefold Palace sooner or later. Won't the Threefold Palace easily figure out Xiong Nan's plan? Qiao Shui was disgusted by the demon's actions, but she was puzzled by Xiong Nan's actions. Mu Yu sank into deep thought. He still couldn't see through Xiong Nan. At first, he thought that Xiong Nan was just a simple and honest senior brother who stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, Mu Yu later realized that Xiong Nan had hidden himself too well. He had fooled everyone. Xiong Nan controlled almost 100,000 self-cultivators back then. Almost all the major sects had people under his control. However, not all demons are as arrogant and domineering as these people. There are many demons who aren't even on the Supreme Immortal leaderboard. I think Xiong Nan might be planning something else. He must have thought of this problem. Mu Yu couldn't figure out what Xiong Nan was doing, but he couldn't just stand by and watch these demons run amok. He would help as many as he could so that the self-cultivators of the smaller sects wouldn't have to live such miserable lives. The night gradually deepened. The two of them prepared to leave for the Azure Dragon Dynasty tomorrow. The purpose of going to the Azure Dragon Dynasty was very clear. It was to let the Dragon Vine learn the correct cultivation method. It was also to see if the Demon Kings could help them rescue Jian Ying and Chen Feng. At the same time, Mu Yu wanted to know how the Demon Kings planned to deal with the Heavenly Enforcers. Early the next morning, Mu Yu and Xiao Shui set off. They flew west for 2 days. Even with their cultivation, they still needed to fly for 2 days. It was obvious how far this place was. According to Xiao Shui, ever since the demons lost to the humans 5,000 years ago, they had migrated to a remote area in the west. It was a desolate swamp with many poisonous insects and ferocious beasts roaming about. Even severed soul-stage self-cultivators didn't dare to casually set foot there. The swamp was overgrown with shrubs and muddy water bubbled. There was also some yellow miasma floating above. If one flew directly into it, they would be poisoned. Ferocious cries of demon beasts could be heard in the distance. Among the plants in the swamp, there were many corpses of demon beasts that had died not long ago. Mu Yu didn't panic at the swamp at all. He was like a fish in water wherever there were plants. However, Xiao Shui told him that if he didn't follow a certain path, he wouldn't be able to see the Azure Dragon Dynasty even if he flew all over the swamp. The Azure Dragon Dynasty and the Sea Fiend King's Island are the same to a certain extent. You won't be able to find it if you fly over. You have to follow a certain path. Just follow me. Xiao Shui jumped onto a reed in the swamp and called for Mu Yu to follow. The demons protected their territory very tightly. If one wanted to go to the demon territory, they had to follow the path they had set up. When they went to the Sea Fiend King's Island, they went through many twists and turns. Fortunately, they had Xiao Shui to guide them this time. Thus, Mu Yu didn't have to worry about getting lost. What is your Azure Dragon Dynasty like? Do you live in caves? Mu Yu asked curiously. Not exactly, but you will understand. Xiao Shui led the way in front. Her path was very winding. Moreover, she was following a certain path. There were many paths, including a certain stone, a certain tree branch, a certain leaf. They were quite strange and didn't have any pattern. These things don't look very eye-catching. They can be found everywhere in the swamp, but they have a special aura that only the devil race can recognize. I mainly rely on the water they leave behind, Xiao Shui explained. Although Mu Yu had no sense of direction, he wouldn't forget a path as long as he walked it once. Xiao Shui used water droplets to mark the paths. As for Mu Yu, he memorized the plants and leaves beside the paths. The plants he stepped on were different. The path forward was very winding. They also encountered many powerful demon beasts. However, after seeing Xiao Shui, these demon beasts only roared a few words symbolically before disappearing into the swamp. According to Xiao Shui, these demon beasts were responsible for guarding the outer path. There were even some powerful 7th-rank demon beasts in the swamp. Whether one can become a demon beast or not depends on one's aptitude. Not all powerful demon beasts can awaken intelligence. However, although those demon beasts don't have intelligence, they are still very powerful. Demon beasts with insufficient cultivation don't dare to casually provoke them. Xiao Shui stepped on a rock and politely greeted a 7th-order demonic beast that was glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey. It was a saber-toothed 7-star tiger. Its fangs were 2 meters long and its aura was very powerful. It didn't appear because of Xiao Shui, but because of Mu Yu, an unfamiliar outsider. After Xiao Shui explained to it, the saber-toothed 7-star tiger retreated. How much longer until we reach? Mu Yu and the others had been walking in the swamp for nearly a day. The sky was already dark and the surroundings were pitch black. They could only rely on the light emitted by Xiao Shui's water spirit to barely see the surrounding 4 to 5 meters. We should be able to reach it by dawn. Our Azure Dragon Dynasty is truly a desolate place. Xiao Shui stopped and turned her head to ask, how about we rest for a while? All right, let's rest. I'm so tired. Little Shui nodded. Tired your head? I've been the one walking the whole way. What are you tired of? Mu Yu unhappily flicked Little Shui's head. Let's rest for half an hour in front. In any case, there's a huge crack in front of us. Grandpa Azure Dragon has set up some kind of formation under the crack. It has a powerful suction force and we can't cross or fly over it. However, there's a bridge that will appear every 4 hours. We can just walk over it. Xiao Shui walked forward for half an hour and stopped under a tree. The moonlight couldn't shine into the swamp. With the help of the water spirit's brilliance, Mu Yu could clearly see the so-called crack in front of them. The crack was about 10 meters wide and was unknown how long it was. This crack is very similar to chaotic Burial Valley. Mu Yu said thoughtfully. I'm not sure. Grandpa Azure Dragon usually warns us not to fall in, and no one dares to disobey. It's said that the crack spans the entire swamp. However, after passing through this crack, we'll truly enter the Azure Dragon dynasty. This crack can be considered our Azure Dragon dynasty's outer defense line. Several bridges will appear every 4 hours, and the bridges will only appear for 15 minutes. It's neither long nor short. Qiao Shui explained. What kind of person is the Azure Dragon Monster King? Is he easy to talk to? Mu Yu thought of the monster kings he came in contact with. Every monster king had a different personality. For example, the White Ape Monster King was very carefree and frivolous. His skin was as thick as a wall. The Sand Eagle Monster King was very cold. Even though he was controlled by Xiong Nan, he hid his emotions very well. In comparison, the Sea Demon King was more like a refined scholar. He spoke in a refined and polite manner. He was also easier to talk to. Qiao Shui thought for a while and explained, Grandpa Azure Dragon? How should I put it? He's very good to me. However, he's a very arrogant person with a very straightforward temper. Let me put it this way. He didn't even show much affection for the 9th level bloodline Long Xingyun. On the contrary, he's more interested in those monster clansmen who don't have true dragon bloodline but have strong cultivations. Just like me, I look down on mixed blood dragons the most. However, he doesn't care about other monster clansmen. At least they don't pretend to be dragons. Longting interrupted. Don't flatter yourself. You're no different from an earthworm now. Little Handsome mocked. Do you want to die? Long Teng was furious. Mu Yu nodded thoughtfully. That means he's quite sensible. You can say that. However, the Azure Dragon dynasty's affairs aren't handled by Grandpa Azure Dragon. Instead, it's the 4 dragon clans. I told you last time that the 4 dragon clans are the Northern Abyss Jade Flood Dragon, Hidden Forest Black Tiger Dragon, Purple Lightning Flying Dragon, and Devil Spirit Dragon Python. Long Xingyun belongs to the Devil Spirit Dragon Python's faction. Mu Yu remembered that Long Xingyun's original form was a dragon python. Long Xingyun is the son of the Northern Abyss Jade Flood Dragon King. His mother belongs to the Devil Spirit Dragon Python's faction. Therefore, the 2 factions are united. The Hidden Forest Black Tiger Dragon and Purple Lightning Flying Dragon each have their own factions. The rest are the monster clansmen who don't have true dragon bloodline. In the end, strength is the most important. If you're strong enough, you'll be roped in by the 4 dragon clans even if you don't have true dragon bloodline. Then which faction do you belong to? Mu Yu asked curiously. To be honest, Qiao Shui, as a human with Yu Meng's ability, was able to live in the monster clan for so many years and live in harmony with the monster clansmen. Me? Of course I belong to the liberal faction. The liberal faction refers to the monster clansmen who don't have true dragon bloodline. Although we're weaker than the other 4 dragon clans, we don't need to compete with others. After all, the throne of the Azure Dragon dynasty won't fall into our hands. We don't need to scheme against each other all the time. Everyone just needs to be themselves. Qiao Shui said. Mu Yu shrugged. Qiao Shui's words made sense. Huala. Chapter 742. Mu Yu immediately became vigilant, thinking that it was another demonic beast looking for trouble. However, Qiao Shui stood up nonchalantly and said, Let's go, the bridge has already appeared. The bottom of the chasm was like the gaping maw of a gigantic beast in the abyss, and there was no way to know what was down there. Mu Yu wasn't afraid. In any case, he had already ventured into countless dragons' lair and tiger's den, so there was nothing to be afraid of in this strange abyss. The bridge above the chasm was invisible, but Qiao Shui knew the exact location of the transparent bridge. She had Mu Yu follow behind her so that they wouldn't have to worry about tripping. After stepping onto the transparent bridge, Mu Yu could clearly feel a powerful suction force coming from the bottom of the bridge, as if it was going to drag them into the abyss. Even with Mu Yu's body integration stage cultivation base, he was unable to withstand such a powerful suction force. The bridge is very narrow, and it can only accommodate 2 people standing side by side. Don't stray. Qiao Shui grabbed Mu Yu's hand, worried that something would happen to Mu Yu. What's there to be afraid of? You don't want me to fall. Mu Yu chuckled. Qiao Shui pinched Mu Yu and chided, "You're so talkative." It was only a distance of 10 meters, and they quickly crossed the bridge. However, the other end of the bridge wasn't a swamp this time, but a surging river. Because it was nighttime, there was only a faint moonlight, and no one knew where the pitch-black river flowed. This river flows into the abyss just now. Qiao Shui stepped on the surface of the river with Mu Yu and headed towards the misty night. Shouldn't there be a waterfall there? I didn't even hear the sound of a waterfall. Mu Yu sat on the surface of the water, and the flowing water formed a bench beneath them. With Qiao Shui around, they didn't need to worry about the river at all. I don't know. I secretly went down once before, but I didn't reach the bottom even after 2 hours. Then, I was blocked by a barrier. I don't know where the river flows to. Qiao Shui led Mu Yu forward very quickly. To Qiao Shui, the water route was much faster than the air route. Even so, they still walked for several hours. In the end, the sky was already bright, but they still hadn't reached the shore. Why is this river so wide? Where are the 2 shores? Mu Yu looked around, but he couldn't see where the riverbank was. He only knew that they were going against the current, and the water was splashing below, but it couldn't splash them. This river is called the Heavenly Monster River. The width of the river is the same as the width of the crack, so it should span the entire swamp. Qiao Shui was already familiar with the path, so she was not surprised. However, after walking for another 2 hours, they finally saw land in front of them. The Heaven Demon River gathered from all the gaps in the land. Qiao Shui walked to the shore and entered a forest. Many demon beasts could be seen in this forest, and they were all high-level demon beasts. Many demon beasts ran towards Qiao Shui and intimately rubbed against her. Qiao Shui patted their heads. She got along very well with these demon beasts. At this moment, 2 Fenshin stage demon beasts suddenly jumped out of the forest. One of them still had a mantis arm, which looked very strange. Qiao Shui, it's you. One of the demon beasts had 2 antennae on his head, which looked like the antennae of an ant. His head was a little small, and he looked a little silly. Then, Mu Yu knew what the demon beast's true form was. It was the cerebellum giant ant. It was a kind of demon beast that was born slow but had boundless strength. Back when he was in the Array sect, Mu Yu had tried his best to command the cerebellum giant ant to fight. Little flower ant and mantis brother, is it your turn to be on duty today? Qiao Shui greeted. Yes. You, why did you bring back a human? Little flower ant looked at Mu Yu vigilantly. She was very wary of humans. According to Qiao Shui, there was no other human in the Azure Dragon dynasty other than her. Don't panic. He is a guest invited by Lord Sea Demon King. Lord Sea Demon King should be back, right? Qiao Shui asked. Lord Sea Demon King is indeed back. He did say that a human would come here. It seems like it is you. Then, you 2 can go in. Little flower ant and mantis didn't make things difficult for Mu Yu. They nodded at Mu Yu and let him go. Not long after Qiao Shui and Mu Yu left, Mantis suddenly whispered to Little Flower Ant, Lord Abyss Jade Dragon said that if a human comes here, we have to report to him. You wait here. I will be back soon. I am afraid it is because of Long Xingyun. This time, Lord Abyss Jade Dragon is very angry. Little Flower Ant shook her head. Qiao Shui and Mu Yu didn't know what the 2 people behind them were talking about. They had already entered the depths of the forest. After walking for a while, they came face to face with an arch made of vines. Qiao Shui smiled and said, Welcome to the Azure Dragon dynasty. After saying that, she took the lead and went through the arch, disappearing behind it. Mu Yu followed closely behind. After going through the arch, he finally saw the true face of the Azure Dragon dynasty. What entered his eyes was a steep and wide valley. It was about 100 meters wide. The valley was very long and narrow, and it led to the distance. In the middle of the valley was a road made of stone. There were some curved stairs on both sides of the road that led to the cliff of the valley. The valley was at least 400 to 500 meters high. The most peculiar thing was the cliff of the valley. There were all kinds of wooden houses that extended from the cliff. They were just hanging in the air. If one counted carefully, there were at least 1,000 houses. These houses were arranged at different heights. They were crisscrossing, making good use of every space. There were wooden balconies and railings around each house. At the same time, there were stairs that zigzagged between the houses of different heights. One could use these stairs to walk to the ground between the valleys. "Do you devil race people live in the air?" Muyu couldn't help but marvel at the uncanny workmanship of the buildings. All the houses were built in the air above the cliff. They were staggered from each other, allowing the sun to shine on each house. This is only the tip of the iceberg of the Azure Dragon dynasty. We can't casually fly to the roofs here. We have to take the stairs, otherwise it would be impolite. However, we can fly on the main road in the valley, Xiao Shui said as she flew in the air. Muyu looked at the bustling devil race people on the main road. There were many people shouting loudly, as if they were buying and selling something. There were all kinds of signs outside the low-rise houses. There were tea stalls, restaurants, inns, restaurants, everything that one could think of. When Muyu arrived here, he felt as if he had arrived at a paradise. Moreover, after the devil race people turned into humans, they were no different from humans. Therefore, Muyu didn't realize that this was the Azure Dragon dynasty. Ever since the devil race people were forced to move here, they have been learning the living habits of humans. Therefore, this place is actually no different from a human city, Xiao Shui explained. When Muyu flew past, he clearly heard one of the demon clansmen shouting in a low, muffled voice, "Barbarian bull tendons and bones, 10 spirit stones for sale, don't miss it." The devil race people are devil beasts. What do they eat daily? Muyu curiously asked. For the human race, there were many flavors to choose from. Any kind of demon beast could be caught and cooked once or twice. From head to toe, they could be made into a delicacy. However, the demon race was transformed from demon beasts. What was their food? The devil race people's diet is very rich. First of all, there are ordinary animals without spirit energy. There are chickens, ducks, geese, and even cows. Many devil beasts are classified as having no possibility of awakening their intelligence. Therefore, these devil beasts will also become food for everyone. However, if there is a devil beast that can awaken its intelligence, then it will be listed as a devil beast that is forbidden to be eaten. They flew past the noisy devil race people below. 2 devil race people seemed to be quarreling because of something. This had nothing to do with them, so they didn't stop. Xiao Shui continued, "For example, I remember that there used to be a kind of delicious rock sparrow. It was a common dish on the table. Rock sparrows are ordinary animals without spirit energy. However, one of them unintentionally awakened its intelligence and cultivated into a devil race person. Therefore, rock sparrows are now listed as forbidden to be eaten. However, that was 7 or 8 years ago. Later, it seems that the rock sparrow devil race person's body was too weak and didn't live for more than 10 years. In recent years, many devil race people have been calling for rock sparrows to be listed as edible devil beasts again. However, some departments above have not approved it. Muyu felt that the devil race was really a mysterious existence. They could even play like this. That rock sparrow devil race person had prevented their race from becoming food on the table. It was interesting. If it was me, I would just grab one and roast it. Why would I care so much? Xiao Shui usually wanted to roast any devil beast. You can do that in the outside world, but don't do that here. Many devil beasts have awakened their intelligence before. Once they are discovered, they will be severely punished. It is possible that they will be locked up for a few years. What do you want to eat? Don't go hunting in the forest. Go to a restaurant. Spirit stones can be used here, Xiao Shui said seriously. It's fine, Little mouse. If anything happens, I will protect you. Long Ting said indifferently. Xiao Shui dissuaded. The devil race also has their own social system. All kinds of rules have to be followed. Even Grandpa Azure Dragon sets an example. Long Ting, don't cause trouble. Didn't that Long Xingyun always want to kill me? Then can I only eat dragon pythons? Long Ting snorted. He wants to kill you because of his personal grudge. Killing each other is also forbidden here. However, there is usually a life and death stage here. Some devil race people are natural enemies. It is inevitable that there will be conflicts. If there are grudges that will not end until one of them is dead, they are allowed to settle it at the life and death stage. Xiao Shui said. They passed by a floating circular building that spanned across the entire valley. At this time, there was no one there. However, the ground above was stained with blood. According to Xiao Shui, this was the life and death stage. But fighting on the streets doesn't seem to be prohibited. Mu Yu lowered his head and saw two devil race people fighting angrily on the street. Spirit energy was sweeping around and there was a group of people shouting. The city guards will come to mediate. Xiao Shui said. Sure enough, two spirit-severing stage devil race people flew over. They were dressed in blue robes and pulled the two people apart. The society of the devil race is similar to that of the human race. However, there are many differences. After all, the devil race people came from devil race. They have the ferocity of devil race people and natural enemies. It is very easy for conflicts to occur. The reason why killing each other is forbidden is because the devil race people are very few. If they continue killing, they will really become extinct. This road is only the entrance. The population of the devil race is not large, but it has developed to over 10 million people. The valley is only a small part of it. There are also some living in the forest and the river. As for that place, it is the palace. Ordinary devil race people are not allowed to casually enter the palace. That is Grandpa Azure Dragon's residence. Xiao Shui and the others had already avoided the devil race people flying around in the sky. They left the valley and arrived at a vast forest. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,